The protagonist finds himself reincarnated into another world. He is confused and unable to move or remember anything. He wonders if he was in an accident. As he is just reincarnated, he is a baby. He naturally starts crying. Hearing his cries, a young, beautiful woman walks into the room. The woman asks the boy if he is hungry. The MC, looking at the beautiful woman, thinks she must be a nurse, which would mean he's in a hospital. But then, the woman raises her finger and says, "Illuminate." A ball of light forms at her fingertip. The moment he sees this, the MC realizes he's been reincarnated into a world where magic exists. The woman gently picks him up from the bassinet, calms him down, and breastfeeds him. Afterward, she puts him back into the bassinet. He gets quite excited when he realizes that not only has he been reincarnated into a magical world, but this beautiful woman is his mother. He's starting his new life as a baby, though he doesn't have a name yet. In this world, there's a tradition called the naming ceremony, where a child is given a name when they turn 6. His mother's name is Marie, and his father's name is Asura. The scene shifts to outside the hospital. Marie is carrying the MC in her arms as they head home. Along the way, a few women stop to admire the little boy Marie is holding, and they compliment how cute the child is. They speculate that he must be Marie and Ashira's third child, and Marie confirms. The scene transitions to the MC resting in his bassinet. His thoughts drift to the most intriguing thing he's discovered, which is magic. As he looks around the room, he notices there's no visible source of light, which makes him wonder if magic is used for such simple things. This leads him to believe that magic must be a normal part of everyday life, and he might be able to use it someday. Excited, he starts imagining all kinds of magic: fire, wind, water, ice, earth, and lightning. Feeling eager, the MC decides to try magic himself. He raises his tiny hand and attempts to cast a simple light spell, but nothing happens. He tries again and again, but with no success. Frustrated, he starts crying. Hearing the cries, Marie rushes in, picks him up, and gently soothes him. Since his previous plan did not work, he decides to observe how his family uses magic in order to understand it better. As he pretends to fall asleep, Marie places him back in the bassinet. But just as she's about to leave, she notices the boy staring right at her. The MC watches his mother use Illuminate, and starts to wonder if some kind of energy is being pulled from their bodies and turned into magic. He figures that energy is key to using magic, and that he probably needs mana to make it work. But since he hasn't developed the vocal cords needed to chant spells yet, he decides he'll have to find the mana within himself and train it. 3 years go by, and the MC spends all that time training his mana. But still, he can't use any magic. He is from a poo farming family and barely gets something to eat. He is always hungry, so from that day on, he decides to start looking for food. The MC explains, there are 2 types of mana, one that exists within your body, and another that can be found all around us. The external mana can be absorbed into your body by inhaling through your mouth, then blended with the internal mana already inside. When the MC first discovered this, he began fusing them in his lower abdomen, just below the stomach, and has been working on spreading it throughout his body. By breathing in and merging the external mana with his internal mana, the MC has learned to refine the mana within himself. However, he needs to wait until he's 6 years old and attends the naming ceremony to actually use magic. Even after the naming ceremony, he would only be able to cast simple lifestyle spells like Illumination, Ignite, and Create Water, since his parents only know basic lifestyle magic. Ever since he was a baby, the MC has been trying to use magic over and over again. He places his hands on the ground, taking deep breaths as he inhales mana. He pulls the mana beneath his stomach, refines it, and brings it up towards his chest, then lets it flow through his limbs. Once it reaches the edges of his body, he carefully reaches out to it and pulls it back in, slowly circulating the mana without stopping. In the air, mana looks like a gas, but once it's inside your body, it feels more like a sticky liquid. As it starts to overflow, he gathers the mana into his palms and releases it into the soil, trying hard to maintain his focus. This is where he lost control last time. He knows the imagery is key when training mana, so he visualizes it clearly. He tries to cast a spell, but because he carelessly tried a spell, all the mana he had carefully channeled into the soil scatters. It wouldn't be a stretch to say that the heart of any field lies in the quality of its soil, soft and fluffy, warm to the touch, and packed with nutrients. You clear out the weeds and properly cultivate it, making sure it gets the right drainage and sunlight. In his previous life, his grandmother, out in the countryside, would use an all-purpose fertilizer to enrich the soil. He puts his hands on the ground and tries again. This time, it works. He's managed to create several neat soil lines in the field, spaced out just right. He figures the ridges cover about 10 square meters, though the terrain varies. The MC and his family are farmers, but the soil in their fields is hard and overgrown with weeds, a worst-case scenario. The MC hasn't seen any agricultural machinery in this world yet, and the technology in this world is way behind compared to what he was used to. Magic here is pretty simplistic. This is the first time he's used magic since being reborn in this world, and he sees it as his first step into this new life. He feels hungry after using magic, and he speculates that using magic might make you hungry. He begins planting a vegetable called 20, which has a bad reputation about its taste, but the boy doesn't care as long as he has something to eat. To be honest, up until now, he regretted being born into this world. As he starts watering the fields, he realizes it's way too hard for a 3-year-old. Watering is so exhausting. It's been 5 days since he first succeeded in using magic, and every day, he's been using it on the soil. Now, part of the land has been transformed into soft, fertile field. Flowers are already blooming, which usually signals a good harvest, but it's only been 5 days when it normally takes 20 days for 20 to harvest. Clearly, this is happening way too fast, but there's not much he can do about it. The MC grabs a flower and pulls it out, and he is surprised by the number of roots, which are more than 10 of them. Normally, there should only be a few edible ones. He picks one root up and takes a bite, but it tastes awful and bitter. This marks the beginning of his farm's revival. After improving the soil, he shifts his focus to selective breeding. As he expected, the vegetables in his fields are growing way too fast. 20s usually take 20 days to grow, but these only took 5 days, which is pretty alarming. There hasn't been anything unusual about what he's eaten so far, and if he really cared about it, he could have just gone hungry. Now that he thinks about it, the food from his past life was fresh, delicious, and beautiful too. He reminds himself that patience is the key. Farmers and researchers took a long time to selectively breed everything to where it was. But still, something here is defying common sense, and that thing is magic. He doesn't fully understand the theory behind it, but his vegetables are growing incredibly fast, so he's going to take advantage of it. He eats another vegetable, cringing at the terrible taste, but he hopes that, eventually, it'll improve the flavor of the 20s. But how exactly is he supposed to accomplish that feat? The scene transitions and MC is tucked in bed when he remembers a story from class about green peas. They had examined the wrinkles of thousands of peas with their own eyes, and from the data they collected they discovered something like the principle of inheritance, or maybe it was Mendel's law. Right now, though, he doesn't have enough varieties of 20s to crossbreed. The scene shifts and MC is standing in the 20 fields. His first task is to check the features of the 20s. Not only are the roots different, but there are also small differences in the stems and flowers. Some are black, others a purplish red. A few, though fewer in number, have larger clumps. Some flowers are white, others yellow. He checks over them, looking for any small differences. The taste can't be forgotten either. Once each trait is classified, they can be crossbred. The fields are divided into 6 sections, each for a specific trait. Although the MC started experimenting with magic to secure food, his half-baked attempts gradually became part of his daily routine. Along the way, he realized something interesting. The vegetables themselves also contained magic. The unique magic he developed fuses both internal and external mana. Whenever he uses magic, this fused mana gets consumed, leaving him exhausted. Once his internal mana is depleted, he can't fuse his mana or use magic until it recovers. While his mana does recover naturally over time, it's not exactly the quickest process. That's when he figured out that regularly eating the vegetables helps speed up the recovery. After eating them consistently, he noticed that his mana would replenish faster, although it still takes a little while after eating for the effects to kick in. One more important question remained: which food restores the most mana? The differences in recovery could be seen across the various breeds of 20s. The taste hasn't changed much, but the MC decided to put that aside for now. His next step is to sort the ones that restore the most mana. What started as simple curiosity about crossbreeding has turned into a fun daily discovery of something new. What he knows for sure is that he should compare and prioritize the food that recovers the most mana. After all, there's a limit to how much his body can handle, and he wishes he knew a faster method. He remembers when they were sorting rice, they'd drop the seeds in salt water to check if they sank or floated. All of the 20s sink in the salt water though, so he decided to expand the field for now. At first, he couldn't concentrate without closing his eyes, but now he's gotten used to it. He feels a shimmering heat, but can't make it out clearly. He focuses the refined mana directly into his pupils. He sees a pale blue gas rising from the field. He plucks out the 20s and confirms that the blue gas is being generated by them. The blue part of the root leaks out, escaping into the air. He's excited because he discovered that the ones that recover the most mana are also the deepest shade of blue. The blue color must be mana. After that, he continues to observe and eat as he focuses mana into his eyes. He notices that, in clumps of 5 or 6, the largest ones are also the most mana-dense. And just like that, he spends his days working on genetics. 2 more years pass, and MC is now 5, continuing to discover even more things. He found a type of magic that recovers a lot of mana, but it doesn't have any immediate effects. When he concentrates mana into his eyes, the way he perceives things changes, and the new information, along with the blue color of magic, left him excited for quite a while. He wonders if concentrating mana into different parts of his body might do something too. This line of thinking isn't wrong. Until now, he had been circulating mana throughout his body and letting it seep into the soil to use his magic. But when he focuses mana into specific body parts, it strengthens that part of the body. So instead of letting the mana flow out, he keeps it inside. He calls this body strengthening magic. Thanks to it, watering the crops becomes much easier, and he's able to expand the fields as well. This gets him thinking, if he can enhance his muscles, what about his internal organs? Can he enhance them as well? If he boosts his digestion, maybe he can increase how fast he absorbs mana from the vegetables he eats. He tries and boosts his digestion, and feels that both his absorption and digestion rates have improved. He spent a lot of time fine-tuning his magic to fit different situations. Then scene transitions and MC's father leaves, and his mother sees his father off, telling him to come back home safe. His father, who is the pillar of the family, has to go. The reason he is leaving is because he is called to war. But why did a farmer have to leave home to join the war? A large-scale conflict has erupted, forcing most of the village's manpower to leave. The MC had always felt that the technology in this world was severely lacking, and it seems the root cause is war. During peaceful times, the villagers come together to cultivate the land bit by bit. There's a surplus of available land, so how much you own depends on how much you can cultivate. If there were no wars, more fields could be farmed, leading to technological advancements and greater prosperity. In other words, there's no need for him to worry about his father since this isn't the first time his father has gone to war. The scene shifts to the boy standing in the fields. He's thinking it's safe to assume that his self-made magic to create fields is crucial. Taxes are proportional to how much land is used, so the MC's fields have the upper hand. The crops grow quickly and have higher yields. But what's really bothering him is the poor quality of equipment for those who left for war. Some of them only had farming tools, and he wonders if those would even work in a fight. Basically, these men are treated like common soldiers, and they end up getting injured, which could lead to the land becoming unstable and them losing their homes. With memories of his previous life, he really doesn't want to kill anyone. But there's a war, and there's nothing he can do about it. Weapons and armor will be the bare minimum requirement for war, but the most important thing is money. You can never have too much of it, especially in war. But here's the problem. Inside the village, people usually just trade goods with each other, so there's no actual money being exchanged, no cash flow at all. Neither the 20s nor the vegetables are bringing any money. Since it's like this, there's only one thing our guy can do. He'll have to rely on a merchant to generate some cash. The boy goes to ask his mother for advice. She suggests making sandals, pointing out that all sorts of things can be made from dried 20s stalks, which could help him buy what he needs. However, the boy finds this idea inefficient. He thinks that merchants who travel between towns and villages selling goods have a better approach. Plus, the ability to negotiate prices makes it seem like a more reliable way to make money. The scene shifts to a merchant admiring the sandals the boy made. The merchant compliments them, saying they're pretty good. The boy explains that his mother taught him how to make them, so he's been making them every day. The merchant buys the sandals for 6 worn-down coppers, but the boy feels a bit disappointed. He thinks, it's not like the merchant is ripping him off. The price must just be lower than he expected. But at this rate, it'll take forever to save up for weapons. Determined, the boy runs after the merchant to ask about the market prices for goods. It's been a few days since then, and I've learned the market prices from that troublesome merchant. Now, I'm trying something different. I started experimenting with growing magical mushrooms. Based on what I found out, this should be a solid way to make money. The merchant had shown me a magical mushroom and told me they're super rare. But apparently, the primary material for them doesn't grow well and is in short supply. Funny enough, I realized it's just a shiitake mushroom. I ate one, and it tasted way plainer than I expected. Using a cultivation technique, I've managed to grow shiitake mushrooms. Basically, mushrooms grow from fungus on trees, which is their main source of nutrients. If I can create an environment where the fungus can thrive, I could grow them artificially. And if magical mushrooms grow the same way shiitake does, then the possibilities are endless. The scene shifts, and our boy is carrying several logs of wood. The logs had already been dried, which saved him a lot of effort. Getting the right balance of dryness and dampness is key. After that, he planted the fungus in the logs and waited for it to grow. But if it were that easy, someone else would have done it by now. So, what should he do? Since it's called a magical mushroom, it must have a decent amount of mana in it. If it's stealing nutrients from the tree, it's probably absorbing mana too. In that case, why not just give the logs his own mana? Beaming with confidence, he's ready to experiment. He decides to infuse different amounts of mana into each log to see what happens. And with that, he starts channeling mana into the logs. Our boy's day starts with tending to the fields during the day, infusing the logs with magic by evening, and making sandals all night. After waiting some time, 3 mushrooms finally grew on one of the logs. It's not much, but his experiment worked. To make any real profit, though, he'll need to scale it up. Even that merchant had more mushrooms than this. But there's a problem. His house doesn't have any more space for them. Instead of more storage, he needs a dedicated building. An architectural challenge for him. When he uses magic to create a field, he raises the soil to make ridges. So by that logic, it should be possible to reshape the soil into a building too. He's not diving into this without a plan. There's a huge amount of soil here that can be used as building material. Creating something from nothing with magic is incredibly difficult. Take earth magic, for example. In games, it's often about collecting refined mana in your palm to throw gravel stones. The damage depends on the speed of the stone. If you can visualize the whole process, it can be done, but it's super cost inefficient. It's way more mana efficient to use something that already exists. Our boy places his hands on the soil. For some reason, the only time he can properly cast magic is when he's working with soil. It wouldn't be an issue if he could just turn soil into metal, but the real challenge is building a storehouse using soil. He starts gathering mana, and when he tries the spell, he collapses and passes out. He's later shown resting in bed, with his mother by his side, taking care of him. When he wakes up, his head is hurting. Turns out, he's been bedridden for 2 days, and everyone's been mad at him. The reason for his sudden collapse was likely due to all the mana in his body being drained, which is basically acute mana deficiency. Normally, his mana circulates through his body to fuel his physical strengthening magic, which boosts his physical abilities. He's just relieved it didn't turn into a run out of mana and you're done for kind of situation. The MC is shown back in the field, reflecting on the valuable lesson he learned from his failed attempt. While scouting the area, he notices a large hole where he tried to cast the spell. The damage wasn't too bad, but he realizes that the sudden drain of mana was likely due to the relationship between area and volume. In simple terms, he probably used 10 times more mana than necessary. Deciding to hold off on constructing anything for now, he shifts his focus to creating building materials instead. He successfully makes a brick and continues producing more, eventually building a storehouse. Although it's a basic structure, it looks rough and amateurish, as if it was haphazardly stacked together by someone with little experience. Still, it marks his first completed building. While it falls under earth magic, the potential uses for this magic seem to be expanding. Our boy looks at the fields and thinks they look awful. The land his ancestors had cultivated for generations was now unusable, to the point where even a tractor wouldn't be much help. He's always felt a sense of pride in how special his village is, but the sight of the fields bothers him. He casts a spell on the rough land, clearing it and turning the stones and stumps into fertilizer for the soil. Now he's got 3 kinds of magic, one for cultivating fields, one for strengthening his body or parts of it, and one for creating bricks. Still, calling it magic to cultivate fields feels a bit long. As of now, he's the only one who can use it, so there's no real need to name it. It's not like chanting a spell name does anything anyway. But whenever he's casting magic, he always finds himself chanting, probably because it took him so long to actually learn how to use and cast spells. Our boy places his hands on the soil and mutters the spell's name. He's surprised when the spell activates the moment he speaks. Even though he's used to magic, up until now, he always had to picture what he wanted to happen for it to work. But this turned out to be more efficient than he'd expected. He had finally developed his own original magic. Chantless magic is cool, but it's exhausting. Just thinking about it gives him a headache. He's relieved that now. The magic activates as soon as he chants. He places his hands back on the soil and chants, "Soil improvement." Immediately, he creates several neat lines across a 10 square meter area. They're roughly string-shaped, radiating from the spot where he'd been cultivating 20s before. Using magic through a spell keeps the range of the effect consistent. He can activate the magic in his head, and then adjust the amount of soil being cultivated freely. The mana consumed depends on the scope of the magic, but it stays relatively steady. Still, he wonders why this is happening. Maybe it's because he mutters every time he casts a spell, Our boy thinks it's time to start experimenting, so he begins practicing making bricks. Many months later, he finally manages to create bricks of the same size and mass every time, and his brick creation spell is officially complete. He realizes this is totally conditioning. In this case, the conditioning is casting the spell itself. Like, if you blew a whistle every time you fed a dog, the dog would start salivating just from hearing the whistle. That's how our boy developed his latest technique, called spell casting. Now, he'll need to give names to his body strengthening magic and soil preparation magic too. The other villagers were creeped out for a while, watching him use all these different spells. He might have gotten a bit carried away with the experiments and ended up making way too many bricks. Having a mountain of bricks lying around has become a bit of a problem. Thinking about what to do next, his mom gives him a hint that if these bricks were dishes, they would at least be useful. It then hits him. If he can make bricks from soil, he should be able to make tableware with the same material. He tries and creates a rice bowl just like the ones from his previous life. Then, he makes a variety of tableware and feels a sense of accomplishment seeing it all. But realizing that they already have enough, he starts to reflect. He had been making things without much thought, simply wanting to create. Up until now, everything he's made has been simple brown earth pottery. Now, he decides it's time to shift from quantity to quality. He's going to make a white teacup that'll pair perfectly with black tea. He creates a white teacup and shows it to his mom. She says it's amazing and that she's never seen such pure white tableware before. Our boy proudly names it the White Porcelain Cup and Saucer. He had a feeling that needing to use the exact materials wouldn't be entirely necessary with magic. Still, it feels like a bit of a waste to use it this way. Wanting to make something even more special to make his mom happier, he decides to create another white porcelain cup and saucer, this time adding a drawing of a flower. Unfortunately, the flower looks like it was drawn by a complete amateur, and it turns out our boy has no artistic talent. He hates to admit it, but it's true. Even so, his mom is happy to see the flower cup and saucer. Our boy decides to make tableware that isn't white porcelain. He's heard that tableware can be made from sea sand, so it should be possible. In his previous life, he used a glass cup to pour and drink water pretty much every day. Long, narrow, cylindrical, with a good thickness, some weight, and transparent. He successfully creates a glass cup, and it turns out pretty good. By doing this, our boy ends up making something completely new, something that hasn't been seen in the village, and possibly even outside the village. The scene shifts, and our boy sells the sandals and 3 magical mushrooms to the merchant for 14 bronze coins. He thinks that even though the amount has increased, they're still just bronze coins. His next challenge is to increase the production of magical mushrooms. At that moment, the merchant calls him over to talk about something. It's perfect timing since our boy has been thinking about selling some of the tableware he made. The merchant asks if our boy would sell him some of the spare bricks he has at home. Confused, our boy wonders what the merchant is referring to. The merchant points out that the storehouse our boy recently built is made of bricks and suggests asking his parents to sell him some. Our boy, realizing what the merchant means, says it's not necessary to involve his parents, as he made the bricks himself and still has plenty left. The merchant seems surprised to learn this. However, our boy is more excited about his new creations and mentions the tableware he's been working on. The merchant, still focused on the bricks, expresses interest in those first, but agrees to check the tableware later. Insisting that the merchant take a look now, our boy is determined to show off his work. When the merchant finally sees the tableware, he's impressed and compliments the craftsmanship, though our boy chooses to keep the method behind it a secret. The merchant agrees to buy both the bricks and the tableware, but he offers only 5 bronze coins for the tableware. Feeling underpaid, our boy considers the value of his work and confronts the merchant internally, thinking it's unfair. The merchant explains that he's paying much more than he usually would for items like these. Still, our boy questions why it's so cheap, believing people would pay a better price for such pretty tableware. The merchant explains that his customers are commoners from small towns and villages, and even if the tableware is beautiful, they wouldn't spend much on it. Our boy reflects on the situation and realizes that, while his work might be worth more, the market the merchant deals with simply doesn't support higher prices. The merchant adds that wealthier buyers don't do business with peddlers like him. They only trade with established merchants they've known for a long time. Our boy thinks even if it's a great product, nobody would buy it. Advertising expensive items to the wealthy, the ones who would actually purchase them, is the key. But there's no internet or newspapers in this world to promote products. It would need to be something like the latest trend among the nobility. He realizes he doesn't have the connections to pull off something like that. Talking to the merchant feels like a total waste of time, leaving our boy completely disappointed. The merchant, sensing the shift in mood, gets nervous and says our boy is giving off a dark, unsettling vibe all of a sudden. He tries to cheer him up, saying not to feel too down about it. After all, the market for bricks is strong, and he'll buy everything our boy has the next time he comes around. Promising to bring 10 times as much next time, the merchant is shown carrying the bricks away on a carriage as he leaves the village. The scene shifts, and our boy is standing next to the piles of bricks. The merchant calls out to him from behind, commenting on how our boy really came through on his promise to provide bricks. He adds that if it were any other kid, he wouldn't have trusted them. But since they've known each other for a long time, he trusts our boy. The merchant also mentions that he brought along someone strong enough to carry all the bricks. A creature appears, something with 2 long horns, a tail, 2 wings, and small hands and legs covered in dragon-like scales. The merchant reveals the name of the beast, calling it Dragon Horse. The dragon horse stands ready to carry the bricks. Our boy looks at it, surprised, thinking to himself that it's a monster. He tries to process it, wondering what exactly a dragon horse is, and realizes it must be some kind of dragon. The merchant explains that it's not the same as a true dragon, but it is rather a work beast, an animal used for heavy labor. Our boy is still curious, trying to wrap his head around what actually is a work beast. Work beasts are creatures raised from eggs to assist their owners. The work beast eggs grow by absorbing mana from their owner, making the creatures highly obedient once they are born. In this sense, the owner can also be seen as the beast's parent. The appearance of the work beast is shaped by the mana it receives as nourishment during its development. In other words, the beast's looks depend entirely on who is hatching the egg. This is why people who can hatch unique or practical work beasts are highly valued and relied upon. All the bricks are loaded onto the carriage, which will be pulled by the dragon horse. The merchant compliments our boy on doing a good job. In this world, dragons are known for their overwhelming power, and it's said that dragon horses resemble the dragons. With their strength, toughness, and bravery, dragon horses are quite popular. Horse-type work beasts are favored for their durability, while bird types, being able to fly, are equally sought after. Our boy, who is curious about work beasts, asks the merchant if work beasts are expensive. The merchant confirms that they are expensive, explaining that dragon horses and any other beasts used as mounts are considered valuable assets. Reflecting on this, our boy realizes that just because there's demand for bricks now doesn't mean it will last forever. He starts thinking about diversifying the items he can sell. Now, he's contemplating the idea of hatching a work beast egg, but he feels uncertain about what kind of creature would come from it, and he does not even know how the hatching process works. Still, he knows that if he gets lucky, it could be a lucrative venture. Determined, our boy calls the merchant. With his grip tightening and a spark of excitement in his eyes, he tells the merchant he wants to try raising a work beast egg and asks him to bring one next time, promising to buy it. When the merchant returns with the egg, the cost of the egg is just barely covered by all the money our boy had saved up until that point. Our boy and his mother are standing in the fields, holding baskets full of vegetables when they notice some villagers returning from the war. Among the men is our boy's father. Our boy's younger sibling rushes towards their father, calling him Daddy. One of Ashira's companions comments on the younger sibling, asking if that's Ashira and Marie's 4th child. They mention that their father has been quite busy, and then head off to their house. Ashira picks up the youngest child, and Marie seems happy, saying it's good to see him. Marie then turns to our boy, suggesting that they get something special from the merchant when he visits next time to celebrate his father's return. She asks our boy if he could lend her some money, promising to pay him back. The boy, however, tells her he doesn't have any money, leaving her surprised. The scene shifts to the past, showing Marie and her son inside their home when he was just 3 years old. Marie asks him if he wants to try growing blue 20s in the fields, though she also reflects that these crops don't taste great and don't trade for much. She wonders if working in the fields is too much for a small child like him. Despite being young, our boy stares at her motivated to work in the fields. Marie and Ashira are standing in the fields, marveling at what their son has accomplished. Marie recalls when he first told her he wanted to earn money to save for the future. At the time, she thought it was amazing that someone so young would have such ambitions. She reflects on how he handles merchants all by himself, cultivates magical mushrooms, he even built a storage room on his own, and created beautiful tableware that astonished her. Marie is truly amazed and proud, wondering how her child has achieved so much. Our boy tells his mother that the reason he has no money left is because he spent it all on a work beast egg. Marie, shocked and frustrated, can't believe our boy used up all that money without consulting her first. She is upset with our boy, while our boy, carefully holding the egg, explains that once it hatches, they'll be able to make even more money. Marie, still angry, responds that if it were that simple, everyone would be rich. She warns him that he needs to be cautious about who he buys eggs from, as she's heard stories of people being sold random animal eggs that rarely ever hatch. She says buying a work beast egg is like gambling away their future. Now our boy is worried, and he realizes that the merchant never mentioned the low success rate for hatching. Marie scolds him, reminding him that she allowed him to buy and sell things because he wanted to save money for the future. She reflects on how men always seem to spend money so quickly. Our boy tries to defend himself, saying it should be fine because he earned all that money on his own. Hearing this, Marie gives an angry smile before yelling that not all of the money was his. He also sold the sandals that everyone worked together to make. She forbids him from buying anything without her permission from now on. Feeling guilty, our boy apologizes and asks if he can still have permission to make purchases, but Marie denies it, insisting he needs to reflect on his actions. Meanwhile, Asura and the youngest sibling are watching the scene unfold from the door, both clearly afraid of Marie. Our boy reflects on how his young, beautiful mother becomes terrifying when she's upset. He starts crying and he thinks most of the money came from selling his bricks, and the earnings from the sandals were barely anything. He's the one in charge of making and selling the bricks to the merchant, and now, feeling more determined, he decides to secretly save up some cash by gaming the system a bit. His focus is now on the egg as it his only option right now to make money. Motivated, our boy weaves a net from 20 stalks to carry the egg around safely, knowing it's important to keep the egg close so it can absorb his mana. He considers that while others could help hatch the egg, everyone's mana is different, which makes it harder to hatch the same type of work beast each time. He notices the egg seems to absorb mana from him just by holding it, giving off a faint blue haze. The egg itself contains very little mana, yet the haze is still visible. Our boy wonders if directly pouring mana into the egg would be beneficial. He focuses and begins injecting his mana into the egg, watching as it darkens into a deeper shade of blue and starts sparkling. Excited, he sees that the mana is being absorbed, but he's unsure how much mana he should be pouring inside the egg. Hoping the egg absorbs the mana properly, our boy continues watching over it and pouring mana into it daily. He begins thinking about building a secret hideout to secure the egg and keep it safe. Our boy starts to reflect on his mother's words and admits to himself that, as much as he dislikes it, she's right. He's just a kid, and he shouldn't be making big decisions about spending money on his own. It's not childish of him to hate the situation, but the customs here are incredibly outdated. In this place, the father of the family, as the patriarch, makes all the final decisions, and the eldest son is the one who inherits this role. The younger sons, like him, have two options: either live their entire lives under their eldest brother's authority, or find a way to become independent. Determined, our boy began saving up to buy a decent weapon, knowing it would be essential if he wanted to make a name for himself during times of war. But now he realizes that he has to think beyond just weapons. He needs to prepare for his future independence as well. He's outside in the fields now, carrying the egg in the woven net and holding a pack of rope in his arms. His mind is set. Apart from saving for weapons, he needs to start planning for his future independence. Like they say, you've got to strike while the iron is hot. The village where the boy was born is surrounded by a wooden fence. The dense forest outside the village creates a natural boundary, and in the past, once the land was deemed secure enough, the trees were cut down and the village was built. But with the ongoing wars, maintaining the fields has become increasingly difficult, and they're shrinking. The boy leaps over the village fence, heading beyond the village boundary. The land outside has no formal owner, except for those who cultivate it. Determined, the boy searches for a suitable place to build his hideout. To keep himself going, he uses body enhancement magic to stave off fatigue, no matter how hard he works. With the rope he's carrying, he ties together multiple trees, then pats the ground to change its layout a little to weaken the roots of the trees. He carefully adjusts the area beneath the tree's roots, thinking that without that support, the trunks will no longer stand. He's right. One by one, the trees start falling, the forest echoing with sharp snaps, creaks, and squeaks. Feeling accomplished, he repeats the process for the rest of the trees that block his planned construction site. Soon the area is cleared of trees. He then flattens a 4-meter area using flatten earth magic, repeating the process until he's created a large, smooth clearing. This flatten earth magic is particularly convenient, he thinks. However, when it comes to actually constructing his hideout, he knows it won't be easy to do it all at once. He remembers fainting once from overusing magic when he was still inexperienced, and that keeps him cautious. Rather than build an entire house, he reasons that he only needs a basic structure. He hypothesizes that the mana cost of building depends on the object's area and volume. While making a building all at once, the interior space of the building also counts as part of the calculation for the amount of mana it consumes. It would waste a lot of mana, and the risk would be too high. His then devises a solution to make 10 by 10 individual walls and piece them together to form the outer structure. In a systematic and orderly fashion, our boy will use the bricks he has been making as the base. He closes his eyes and places his hands on the ground, envisioning the mortar securing each brick in place. The mental image takes shape, and a single wall becomes reality. He repeats the process, slowly forming a simple box-shaped structure. It looks like a cube of tofu. It has an entrance, but it has no roof and no door. Standing in front of the entrance, the boy contemplates the next steps. The roof and door will have to be made by hand, of course, but for now, the essential framework of his hideout is complete. He's managed to build his hideout in a very short amount of time. The boy sits inside his house, cradling the work beast egg. It has grown considerably, its surface now a deep, dark blue that resembles mana, hinting that it might hatch soon. He carefully packs the egg into the woven net, tightening its strings. Just as he finishes, his mother appears at the entrance, letting him know it's almost time to go. Brightening at the news, he gets ready. Today is special as he's turning 6. In their village, turning 6 means it's time for baptism at the church, and he has been eagerly looking forward to it. Once they arrive at the church, he notices that there are only about 10 people in attendance, which is to expected as it is a small village. He struggles to remember his baptism from his previous life, which might not have been the happiest occasion, but this time feels different. Along with the baptism, there's a naming ceremony, adding to his excitement. The priest steps forward, raises his hand and announces that he will start the baptism shortly. After the baptism, our boy will finally be able to use household magic, including spells for cleansing, drinking water, illumination, and fire. The priest explains that humanity has always feared monsters and lived their lives hiding from them. However, many people have gained the ability to use household magic, expanding the number of places where humans can thrive. While they can't defeat monsters on their own, this newfound magic has allowed them to establish large, prosperous settlements, contributing to the rapid growth of the human population. The priest then announces the start of the naming ceremony, letting everyone know that they will go through each person one at a time, so they should wait for their turn. Citizens receive household magic through the baptism ceremony. The church is able to gain followers through this baptism, and the feudal lord receives a register of names as well. It's a system where everyone benefits. Our boy is sitting on a chair in front of the priest. The priest explains that with this naming, he will receive the divine protection of their master and gain the ability to use magic. However, this magic should only be used to improve human lives. The priest asks our boy if he swears not to abuse magic without reason, and our boy agrees. The priest responds affirmatively and opens a book. Our boy is impressed by the binding and decoration of the book, wondering if it's perhaps a name lexicon or something similar. The priest closes the book and taps on it, then raises his hand and announces that Asura and Marie's third child will be christened. He declares that from now on, our boy will be known as ours, and he should live for the Lord and his friends with integrity and righteousness. The priest invokes the Lord's divine protection over him. As our boy reflects on the preparations for granting someone magic, he notices magical power concentrating in the palm of the priest's hand. A magic circle with symbols appears before the priest's palm, prompting our boy to wonder if it's a magic circle. He casts memory preservation magic on himself, a technique he discovered while exploring the effects of concentrating magical power in his brain. This magic proves useful now as new information is being inserted into our boy's mind, and the magic circle grants him household magic. With this, Ars is now able to use household magic. Back at home, he uses illumination magic to light up the room. He reflects on how the household magic is pretty standard. There's no real difference between a kid who just learned it and an adult who's been using it for years. Even improving his magical power didn't make a noticeable difference in how effective the magic is. This means Ars can't significantly boost the power of ignition either. Our boy had hoped that after obtaining household magic, he might be able to use magic beyond just earth magic, but it seems that's not the case. So, he decides to move on and stop focusing on improving household magic. However, there's still another valuable outcome from his efforts. He has Father Paulo's magic circle stored in his memory. He thinks he might be able to understand more about this world's magic by studying the magic circle. Despite spending days analyzing the magic circle, he can't make sense of it at all, and it even costed his sleep because he was spending much time understanding the magic circle. Now, Ars is shown lying on his bed, frustrated that he can't even understand the letters in the magic circle. He realizes that he doesn't even know the letters used by modern people, let alone ancient ones. He sighs, thinking that at the very least he should be able to write his own name. While he's lost in thought of magic circle, he hears the sound of something cracking. He quickly gets up and looks toward the egg, which is placed right beside his bed. It's finally hatching, and Ars wonders what kind of working beast will emerge. Multiple cracks begin to form on the egg, accompanied by more cracking sounds. Growing impatient, Ars thinks it's taking its time and briefly wonders if he should help it hatch. Just then, a big crack appears, and the egg breaks open, revealing a beautiful horse-like beast with 2 horns sitting inside the shell. The beast stands up and comes out of the shell, surprised that the beast can already stand. Ars watches as the little creature struggles to keep its balance. He encourages it, saying, "The little guy can do it." After a bit of effort, the beast manages to stand. Ar claps in encouragement, feeling a surge of happiness as he watches the creature. Gently tapping the beast on its head, Ars thanks it for coming into his life, and in response, the beast squeaks. As he looks at the beast again, Ars realizes it resembles a horse-like reindeer, with the physique of a thoroughbred, but it is covered in long hair. He wonders if it will be big enough to carry things when it is grown. Then he notices the beast eating the eggshell and questions whether it's even safe for it to be eating that. He wonders, what does it eat? The form a work beast takes at birth depends on the magic used as nourishment, and its behavior seems different than the dragon horse. Ars recalls hearing that dragon horses have unique eating habits as they are carnivores. He worries about the prospect of providing meat to the work beast every day, as that would be too expensive for a poor farmer like him. He's also heard it's not uncommon for people to fail to raise them due to the cost of food. Ars wonders what he should do if it needs milk, as he doesn't have that kind of magic that can produce milk. The scene shifts, showing the beast standing next to a basket of radishes, munching on them. These radishes were grown on the excess land in Ra's hideout. Noticing the beast eating, Ars wonders if it enjoys them and thinks to himself that at least the beast seems to be a herbivore. Relieved, he realizes this means he won't go bankrupt from food costs. As Ars sits on the floor in his hideout, the beast approaches and starts growling. He asks if it's already finished eating, noting that there are plenty of radishes, and tells the beast to eat as much as it likes. The beast growls again and tries to climb into Ars's lap. Once settled in his lap, it lays down and falls asleep. Ars wonders what's going on, but as he looks down at the beast, he can't help but think it's incredibly cute. He gently strokes the beast, which snores softly as it sleeps. 10 days pass, and the beast has grown into a full-fledged horse. Ars is surprised at how quickly it has grown, but he did tell it to grow big. The beast now has an overwhelming appearance, and Ars thinks he's definitely going to sell it. He hadn't named it to avoid becoming emotionally attached, but now he feels it's time to give it a name. He recalls how Father Paul had referred to household magic as divine protection, but Ars believes it's more like a program written into one's mind through a magic circle. He decides to test naming the work beast, which has some magic of its own. If naming is successful, the beast should at least be able to produce its own drinking water, which is an important survival skill, as bad water could lead to deadly illness without proper medical treatment. The possibility of the beast having ignition magic is concerning, but Ars figures he'll deal with that if it becomes a problem. He then wonders what to name the beast. Lacking confidence in his naming sense and artistic flair, he wants a name that fits. He thinks of unicorns for single-horned creatures, and tries to remember if a 2-horned creature was called a bicorn or something else. The name Valkyrie comes to mind, inspired by the goddess of war in the legends. Excited, Ars feels the beast's shining silver-white fur gives it a holy aura. He asks the beast if it likes the name Valkyrie, and the beast nods in agreement. Seeing Valkyrie nod, Ars thinks that maybe the beast can somewhat understand human language, impressed by how smart it is. He decides to begin the naming ceremony, noting that lately, he's been able to refine magic as easily as breathing. Closing his eyes, he concentrates, vowing to perform this ritual carefully and delicately. He fills himself up with dense magic, although it's difficult to keep the released magic stable. From here on, he has to focus. He recreates every detail of the magic circle he memorized through a thread of magic. Blood rushes to his head, and his brain feels like it might burst from the strain. Manipulating magic outside the body is exhausting, but he manages to form the magic circle. He's close to his limit, but still completes it. With one final effort, he focuses on naming the beast. He declares the name Valkyrie, and the magic disperses. The burden was heavier than expected, and he's left shaking on the ground, barely able to catch his breath. It would have been disastrous had the ritual failed. Exhausted, he addresses Valkyrie, suggesting they try using magic, and Valkyrie nods. Standing by the door, Valkyrie lets out a small squeal, indicating they should go outside. Ars agrees, knowing it's too dangerous to use fire inside. He's touched by how thoughtful Valkyrie is, and follows her outside. Once outside, Valkyrie looks up and a shining light appears. Ars is astonished by the illumination magic and excitedly praises Valkyrie's magical abilities. Overcome with excitement, he asks Valkyrie to try other magic, and she nods again. Valkyrie proceeds to perform ignition, drinking water, and clean one after another, but also surprises Ars by using floating magic on the bricks in the field. Valkyrie continues to demonstrate other advanced spells like brick making, ground flattening, soil enhancement, magic infusion, and physical enhancement. Ars is even more stunned when Valkyrie shows memory preservation magic. Despite his excitement, Ars is puzzled. Other children who receive names at the church's baptism can only use household magic, so why can Valkyrie use his magic? He wonders if there was an error in the magic circle, or if the naming ceremony process went wrong. Unable to figure it out, he asks Valkyrie to watch as he creates a cup from the ground. He then asks Valkyrie to replicate the same magic, and she does. Ars realizes that Valkyrie can only use the spells he knows after being named. For instance, while Ars can control the size of the land, he flattens by adjusting the amount of magic he uses, Valkyrie's ground. Flattening is limited to a uniform 10 by 10 square meters. In other words, Valkyrie can now use magic but is restricted to the same spells as Ars, without any ability to modify them. This makes Ars realize that the naming ritual is more systematic than divine protection, which also explains why he hasn't been able to customize household magic. Ars compliments Valkyrie, calling her amazing. However, he's concerned about selling a beast capable of using both his original magic and the church's household magic, which is called God's divine protection. He decides he needs to verify whether other work beasts can use magic. The scene shifts to Ars meeting with the merchant for a brick trade, which remains in high demand. Ars casually asks the merchant if he's ever heard of work beasts using magic. The merchant replies that he's never encountered such a thing, and Ars realizes how rare and valuable this information might be. If a well-traveled merchant has never heard of magic-capable work beasts, it must indeed be uncommon. Sensing Ars's curiosity, the merchant asks if his egg has hatched. Ars nods, explaining that the egg produced a horse that could carry loads. The merchant is pleased and asks to see the beast. Ars, having told Valkyrie not to use magic around others, agrees and brings her over. The merchant is impressed, not only by her usefulness as a work beast, but by her stunning white coat, a color favored by the wealthy. When Ars mentions he has no intention of selling Valkyrie, the merchant is shocked. He reminds Ars that the original purpose of buying the egg was to earn money. Ars admits that while he did intend to make money, he's grown fond of Valkyrie and wants to keep her by his side, drawn both to her unique abilities and the bond they've formed. Noticing the conversation, Valkyrie affectionately rubs her face against Ars. Ars reflects that having a strong companion like her could be invaluable for the laborious work ahead. The merchant, sensing an opportunity, proposes a deal. He explains that he has 5 more beast eggs and would like to entrust them to Ars, agreeing to buy the hatched beasts exclusively from him. Ars quickly grasps the proposal. He would raise the beasts and sell only to the merchant. The merchant, confident in the demand for work beasts raised by Ars, believes the arrangement will be profitable even if there are initial losses, and assures Ars he's willing to take the risk. Ars sets terms for the contract, which included that it will last for 1 year, with the option to renegotiate if renewed. The merchant, somewhat wary, agrees. Ars believes this arrangement could be the key to a stable income, recognizing the value of having a consistent supply of beast eggs. Determined to succeed, he turns to Valkyrie and declares that they'll work hard to make this endeavor a success, to which Valkyrie nods in agreement. The merchant, watching them, breathes a sigh of relief. Inside his hideout, Ars examines the new beast eggs, preparing to infuse them with his magic. Valkyrie attempts to nibble one of the eggs. Ars immediately stops her, warning that she's not allowed to eat them. Despite his instruction, she picks one up in her mouth, causing a faint crackling sound that startles Ars, who fears she's broken the egg. But upon checking, the egg is unharmed. Valkyrie then settles beside the eggs as if adopting them. Curious, Ars asks if she wants to care for the eggs herself. Valkyrie nods and begins softly caressing the eggs, releasing a subtle flow of mana into them. Ars, taken aback, realizes that she might instinctively understand that the eggs need mana to develop. Yet, he quickly explains that only his magic should be used to raise them, as the form a beast takes after hatching is heavily influenced by the magic they absorb during incubation. In this case, only Ars's mana will yield the results he desires. But Valkyrie has already infused 3 of the 5 eggs, which now emit a soft glow. Ars acknowledges that it's possible to incubate eggs using multiple sources of magic, though the effort to maintain that level of mana is substantial. Deciding to compromise, he assigns Valkyrie the task of caring for the 3 eggs she's already infused, asking her to ensure they hatch properly. Valkyrie's eyes light up with excitement, and she nods eagerly, ready to nurture the eggs with care and devotion. Ars recalls a memory from his past life of finding a stray puppy in his neighborhood. When his mother noticed, she asked who would take responsibility for its care, doubting he could manage it himself. Shocked by her sternness, Ars promised he'd look after the puppy personally. Although he believed feeding and walking it was enough, in hindsight, he realizes his parents shouldered the costs of food, immunizations, and medical care. Reflecting on it now, Ars understands the truth in their words. Caring for a living creature demands effort and resources. In the present, all 5 eggs have hatched successfully, each work beast resembling Valkyrie, only slightly larger. Ars feels accomplished for having reached this stage, yet quickly recognizes a new challenge. Feeding so many creatures has left him short on supplies. As expected, the more animals there are, the greater their consumption. For his work beast business to thrive, he'll need more farmland than the small plot near his hideout. He decides to expand by clearing parts of the surrounding forest. Leading the beasts out, Ars begins cultivating the new fields, first by softening the ground around the tree roots to pull them out, then using his soil preparation and soil improvement magic to make the earth fertile. As he marvels at the results, he's startled to see the other work beasts also using magic. He wonders aloud how they are already capable of magic, despite not even having names yet. This revelation leads him to question if work beasts follow different rules from humans when it comes to magic. Finally, he decides to rely on Valkyrie to guide the others about not using magic in front of humans, confident they'll obey her instructions. Once he completes the fields, Ars reflects on another memory from his past life, measuring land by how many domes it could fit. Before him now is an expanse so vast he can't even gauge its width in domes. Although clearing the forest feels somewhat destructive, he reassures himself upon remembering that these areas once were fields, later overtaken by trees after the local population dwindled. The village head even encouraged expanding the fields. Looking out over the newly cultivated land, Ars considers how vast grazing areas will be necessary for creatures as large as Valkyrie. Although the terrain is now more extensive, it brings up a new concern, getting around efficiently and without exhausting himself or the beasts. Finally, he turns to Valkyrie and suggests they try riding, signaling the start of a new adventure in managing his expanding work beast family. Although Valkyrie isn't exactly like a horse, Ars thinks a saddle or stirrups should still work well on her. However, his father points out that no one in the village knows how to make a saddle or stirrups for work beasts and suggests a cart would be more practical for the work beast. Ars considers this apparently it's normal for work beasts to pull carts rather than carry riders. Still, he's determined to learn to ride a work beast, gripping tightly with resolve. One day, he might be sent onto the battlefield, and knowing how to mount Valkyrie could be a significant advantage, as cavalry is overwhelmingly stronger than foot soldiers in any world. With this in mind, he fits Valkyrie with a makeshift set of reins made from radish stem rope. Even without a saddle or stirrups, he decides he just needs to try mounting her. Climbing up, he takes a seat on Valkyrie's back, holding the reins firmly, and signals he's counting on her. Riding a living creature who has a mind of its own usually requires skill, but surprisingly, mounting Valkyrie is easier than expected. Her intelligence shines as she moves gently to avoid burdening him, letting him manage without a saddle. However, since he's not accustomed to riding, he soon feels the strain. Muscle fatigue sets in quickly, and he realizes just how exhausting riding can be, as his entire body aches from the effort. Ars realizes that despite Valkyrie's care, anything that shakes will still shake. To stabilize himself, he needs to grip Valkyrie's torso tightly with his legs to avoid falling. By engaging his core muscles and keeping his body aligned, he significantly reduces the shaking. He thinks it would be ideal to have a saddle and armor, but lacking that, he considers giving up on riding. Still, his determination wins, and he decides to continue training every day. Later, the scene shifts to Ars and his father lying in beds beside each other. His father remarks that Ars always says something before going to bed. Ars shrugs, denying it. Amid his riding training, he's been learning and practicing new magic as well. As they chat, his mother calls everyone to go to bed. When Ars channels his magical power through his eyes to observe people, he notices a faint blue aura surrounding them, like steam. He speculates that the magic naturally flows from the body and is continuously wasted. Curious about leaking magic, he experiments with preventing this magic from leaking. The result is a noticeable improvement in his natural healing abilities. Ars has been practicing this technique, though not consistently, because it resembles spell cultivation. Spell cultivation allows effects to be constant, just like leveling a defined area or consistently shaping bricks with the same spell. Besides enhancing physical strength, the cultivated spell's effects last a specific amount of time after casting. Even if he falls asleep with a physical strengthening spell active, its benefits remain. Spell cultivation extends the duration of fatigue recovery spells, enabling him to fully recuperate each night. Lying in bed with complete recovery, he feels as if he's a hero. The scene shifts to the merchant standing in fields near Ars's hideout. He is impressed by Ars' progress. He remarks, amazed, that he expected just 1 or 2 hatches, but Ars managed to hatch all 5 work beasts, each growing remarkably fast. Ars responds with mild surprise, and the merchant continues, explaining that even with multiple eggs, it's unusual for them to grow simultaneously. Usually, it takes over a month for even one egg to mature. Ars reflects, suspecting the rapid growth is due to his magic injections. Ars suggests he could sell one already, but wonders aloud about the potential buyer's intentions, or if the merchant intends to use it for his business. Smiling, the merchant reveals his plan. He doesn't plan to sell the first work beast at all, but rather give it away for free. Ars eyes him suspiciously. The merchant clarifies that he intends to present it to the aristocrats who govern the land. He reminds Ars that merchants like him, who move between villages, lack the connections to trade expensive goods, and selling to aristocrats requires both credit and a recognized reputation, and the aristocratic store monopolizes such transactions, making it nearly impossible for outsiders. Ars recalls a time when the merchant missed out on selling a rare luxury item he crafted simply because he lacked an intermediary. The merchant agrees, explaining that selling high-priced goods is only feasible with aristocratic backing. But with a work beast, things are different. It's valuable, useful, and, given the frequent wars, considered excellent strategic material. Presenting one as a gift would establish strong ties with the aristocracy. Once intrigued, the aristocrats would likely be eager for future purchases, and may even introduce them to other noble contacts. The merchant emphasizes that in this world, ignoring the ruling nobility isn't an option, especially for someone advancing a business that could offer messenger work beasts with strategic importance. Trying to sell such a valuable resource to a hostile noble could put everyone involved at risk. Sensing the stakes, the merchant proposes they head to the aristocratic residence immediately. Ars, intrigued, asks if he is included in the plan. The merchant nods, suggesting he inform his father as well. This marks the first time Ars leaves his village. The merchant, Ars, and Ars' father set off for the aristocratic residence. With the help of their beasts, they pulled the wagon along a bumpy road, reaching the town of Fontana, where the nobles reside, after 3 days. Ars, excited to see the city for the first time, notes the high walls and marvels at the journey. Even though they didn't use a car or bullet train, they still reached in 3 days. He finds the city lively. There are construction projects ongoing. The merchant points out the construction, mentioning the demand for bricks, as part of the city wall is being dismantled and rebuilt to allow for expansion of the city. However, even with reused bricks, he notes, there still won't be enough, so they will need more bricks. Ars asks if the demand for the bricks will continue, and the merchant speculates that while the demand is strong, the locals are still able to produce bricks for now. Ars realizes he might not be able to profit from bricks long term and becomes determined to secure this business deal with the nobles. The scene shifts to all three of them kneeling before a man in formal attire at a stable. The man introduces himself as Raymond, and he is the negotiator for the Fontana household. The merchant respectfully greets him. Ars is slightly disappointed about not meeting the nobles. He realizes he won't be meeting a noble directly, as there's no reason for a head of the family to meet someone like him personally. Raymond assesses the work beasts, noting that he was informed they could be ridden. The merchant confirms, proudly explaining that they're of top quality, even capable of bearing armor. Ars reflects that the merchant's goal was to build connections rather than meet nobles in person. Raymond then turns to Ars, noticing his young age and asking about him. The merchant explains that Ars was the one who raised the work beasts, and besides, Ars would be his father. Raymond, slightly impressed, remarks that this dedication bodes well for their work beast husbandry in the future. The merchant formally requests permission to produce and sell the work beasts, which they've named Valkyries. Ars is momentarily taken aback, thinking Valkyrie was the name of the firstborn, not the species itself. The true Valkyrie, his partner, is back in the village, and he would never consider selling her. Raymond agrees to issue a permit later and assures them he'll inform Mr. Fontana of this arrangement. The merchant expresses his gratitude, and Raymond encourages them to keep up the hard work. Ars is surprised that the negotiations concluded so quickly. However, as Raymond turns to leave, he remarks that these work beasts might not be useful in war. The merchant is shocked to hear this and asks why, and Raymond explains that the horns get in the way, making it impossible to wield weapons effectively. Raymond calls for a servant and instructs him to cut off the beast's horns. A servant approaches with a saw, and Ars, horrified, is about to intervene when his father restrains him with a hand on his shoulder. Ars is overwhelmed, realizing he can do nothing as the negotiator coldly orders the procedure. Back at the inn, Ars sits on the bed, visibly distressed, while his father and the merchant stand behind him, watching. His father speaks first, commending him for holding back during the negotiations. But Ars, unable to shake his frustration, mutters to himself, lamenting how anyone could treat his cute little children, the work beasts, so callously. Seeing his distress, his father gently suggests he go wash his hands. Looking down, Ars notices the roughness on his palms and recalls how, even as their horns were severed, the beasts made no sound. Reflecting, he compares them to well-trained guide dogs from his previous world, who are taught not to bark even under extreme discomfort. Such dogs are so loyal they wouldn't react, no matter how much they endured. Ars realizes that his work beasts, despite their size and strength, share that same silent loyalty. With clenched fists and tears falling, he mourns their resilience. His father sits beside him, encouraging him to calm down, but Ars can't help but voice his worries. He admits that it's not just the act of cutting the horns that bothers him, but the potential for lasting harm to the beasts. What if the beasts live shorter lives because of this? If they perish too soon, wouldn't the blame come back on him? Sulking, he admits his fear that, with the nobles involved, anything is possible, even unjust blame. He's troubled by the notion that severing their horns might lead to a shortened lifespan, and yet he's painfully aware they don't know enough about these creatures' lifespan. Gathering his thoughts, Ars shares his determination to investigate this, understanding that learning about the beast's lifespan and health is crucial if he wants the business to continue. He looks at his father, remarking on his composure through all of it. His father, smiling faintly, responds that it's simply the resignation of a farmer with limited social standing. Ars realizes that his father, despite lacking formal education, has an insightfulness that surpasses his own in certain ways. He thinks back on his own efforts, how he cleared the forest quickly, a feat that sparked rumors among the villagers. Some believed his expansion was due to failing to pay his taxes, and even the village chief tried to seize the fields he'd worked so hard to cultivate. Ars's father tirelessly appealed to the aristocratic family overseeing their land. To sustain the work beasts, they needed to cultivate vast fields to supply enough beets, but their wheat yield alone couldn't cover the taxes on these expanded beet fields. The nobles had an interest in both the work beast husbandry and the forest's cultivation, which worked in their favor. Fortunately, his father's efforts led to them obtaining a license to sell the work beasts, official ownership of the land, and permission to pay taxes in money rather than wheat. They walk through the city together, and Ars's father suggests that since they've come all this way, they might as well explore a bit while buying what they need. Ars feels fortunate to have a father he can depend on, and nods in agreement. As they roam the city, Ars notices the lack of wooden buildings and comments that they don't seem very popular. His father explains that wooden houses are vulnerable to fires caused by ignition magic. Ars observes that the town's buildings also have few windows, to which his father replies that with illumination magic, there's no need for windows to let in light. Ars, a bit disappointed, mutters that everything here is based on household magic, and his father adds that it's all thanks to divine protection of God. Ars considers how household magic only works after someone is named through a magic circle, and wonders if it's truly a power linked to God. Suddenly, Ars spots windows in the distance and clenches his fists in excitement. He thinks there would be a high demand for glass windows, which he could mass-produce like bricks if he could adapt certain spells. Seeing his enthusiasm, his father suspects Ars is planning something new. The merchant notes Ars's ambition, and his father agrees, reflecting on how the village has flourished thanks to the boy's radishes. The merchant recalls that, in the past, starvation was a harsh reality due to frequent crop failures. Years of unending famine left people dead and the land in ruin, with wars breaking out over food as desperation grew. During these tough times, he came across a particular food, radishes. Previously, wild radishes were unpleasant and hard to eat. But these were different. These were large, crunchy, firm, and filling. They even grew quickly. He realized that if more people had access to these radishes, starvation might lessen. Hearing they came from a northern village, he visited, only to be surprised by the sight, a young boy, not yet baptized, selling these remarkable radishes. Unlike other farmers, the boy had a quick wit and bombarded the merchant with questions about other potential products. Curious, the merchant began visiting regularly, always greeted with a stream of questions from the boy for an hour each time. Years later, the boy, now older, offered something besides radishes, magical mushrooms from the nearby forest. Concerned, the merchant warned him about the dangers of entering the forest alone, but the boy insisted he'd be fine. Knowing others who'd made similar claims only to meet tragic ends, the merchant suggested buying bricks from the boy to keep him safe. The boy produced identical high-quality bricks, but before long moved on to tableware, which sparked the merchant's curiosity further. At first, he suspected the boy might be of noble blood or from a fallen family, but each guess was wrong. Later, after the boy's baptism, he astonished the merchant again by raising valuable horse-type work beasts from the eggs he'd purchased. What impressed the merchant most was the boy's constant drive for new ventures. When asked why he was so eager to make money, the boy explained he wanted to buy weapons to go to war, making the merchant wonder if he aimed to restore a fallen family's honor. But this guess was also wrong. Eventually, the merchant resolved to secure a strong bond with Ars, believing he might one day rise to nobility. To prepare for that future, he vowed to maintain a monopoly on the boy's work beasts and earn his trust. While lost in thought, the merchant hears Ars asking if they're going to continue shopping. Startled back to reality, he quickly agrees, mentally affirming his dedication to Ars and feeling a deep sense of commitment. Ars looks a bit surprised at this declaration of loyalty. Yet from that moment, the merchant's life starts to revolve around this remarkable boy from a distant land. The merchant, Ars, and his father return to their village by carriage. Ars' mother spots them approaching and warmly welcomes them home. Overjoyed to be back, Ars rushes to embrace her. Reflecting on the past few days spent in town, Ars recalls gathering everything he needed, including a saw to manage the numerous fallen trees left unattended after clearing the forest. He also brought home good liquor, fulfilling his father's request. Though he's earned money from trade with the peddlers, he notes that his funds are nearly depleted, but expects profits from selling work beasts to come in steadily. Carrying a basket of beast eggs entrusted by the merchant, Ars heads to his hideout and embraces Valkyrie, his prized work beast. He's decided to market the Valkyrie, a rare species of work beast, at a high price, comparable to an exclusive luxury item, like producing a limited series of cars for elite buyers. Ars realizes that for his business to thrive, he must understand the effects of horn removal on work beasts. The beast presented to the Fontana family had their horns cut off, so Ars needs to investigate how this impacts their well-being and abilities. He is standing in front of the beasts with a saw in his hand. He hatched two beasts, so he decides to leave one with horns intact and another with its horns removed for comparison. Recalling his previous life, he remembers trimming deer antlers to prevent injuries, reassuring himself that work beasts are like livestock, and they are intended for practical use. Apologizing to the beasts, he firmly resolves to go through with the process, eventually cutting off the two sturdy horns. 2 days later, Ars observes both beasts. The one without horns remains in excellent health but seems unable to cast magic. He speculates that cutting a beast's horns inhibits its magic, similar to how humans who lose both hands can't use magic properly, as spellcasting often requires pointing. Thus, horns likely play a crucial role in magic use for work beasts. This insight, Ars considers, could be highly beneficial. The merchant had never encountered work beasts capable of magic, so a Valkyrie that could inject magic into its offspring would give him a loss in the market as he won't be exclusive anymore. Ars embraces the beast with its horns removed, relieved to find that the procedure doesn't appear to threaten its life. Reassured, he decides to remove the horns of all the work beasts he plans to sell to the peddlers. This way, he can ensure they remain strong, healthy, and manageable, while also preventing them from accessing magic, safeguarding his unique advantage in the business. Ars sits in front of the priest, who mentions that Ars has brought something extraordinary. Ars assumes he's referring to the Fontana family permit, and the priest confirms this, but clarifies he's not just talking about the license to sell work beasts. Ars reflects, thinking that in the village, the only formal writing he'd seen was the book from the baptism ceremony. On rainy days, when he couldn't go to the fields, he would come to the church to learn letters. His parents were both literate. Handing the letter to the priest, Ars listens as the priest reads it, explaining that the document officially acknowledges the cleared forest land as his. Ars notes that his father had arranged things so he could pay taxes in wheat, but the priest hints there's more to it. The priest highlights the true significance of the document as it not only grants ownership of the northern forest cleared land, but also permits tax payments in cash. Ars, a bit bewildered, hadn't realized the extent of the implications. The priest points out that the document doesn't specify when or where the cleared land begins, nor does it include exact field measurements. Paying taxes in money suggests the land does not need to even be agricultural, implying Ars could use it for any purpose. Ars, confused, asks what this means. The priest clarifies that the Fontana family has treated him like a ruling clan, effectively granting him privileges typically reserved for those who manage land within the family's territory. The priest explains further that ruling clans are entrusted with governance over land segments in exchange for certain rights, including monetary contributions and the provision of soldiers in emergencies. Although the Fontana aristocrats govern their territory, they don't directly control every part. Ars wonders aloud why he's been treated as a ruling family. The priest suggests that the Fontana family likely wanted to ensure he wouldn't relocate to another land to raise work beasts. Furthermore, as the third-born son, Ars's influence and achievements in land development were unexpected, rivaling even those of established ruling families. As Ars walks toward the fields, he contemplates his new role, realizing that he's somehow shifted into the responsibilities of a ruling family. It's a position beyond the reach of most children his age, and he decides that as long as he's underestimated, he'll take the opportunity to expand his land as much as possible. His focus now is on pioneering, so he envisions his strategy. Riding Valkyrie, he plans to travel through the forest, using magic to loosen the soil and fell trees. The hornless beasts will then drag these trees, piling them together, while he uses land-leveling magic to prepare the terrain. However, Ars knows that simply expanding the land won't guarantee increased income. His plan revolves around 4 resources to generate earnings: the working beasts, magical mushrooms, bricks, and crop yields like tweenies. Selling work beasts alone provides income, yet he needs backup in case sales slow, and he anticipates that demand for bricks could diminish soon. The mushrooms and fields require more manpower as well, leading him to consider hiring help. Living in a village where bartering is the norm, he realizes he'll need to manage his money carefully and decides to seek part-time assistance. At dinner, Ars consults with his family about potential villagers to help with his workload, and his elder brother, Baito, eagerly volunteers. Beto's enthusiasm is clear as he quickly jumps at the chance, insisting he's the perfect fit. Amused, Ars clarifies that he's looking for a part-timer, not necessarily a sibling. Beto, undeterred, assures him he's up to the task. Their mother chimes in, granting her approval as long as both Ars and Beto contribute to the household during the wheat harvesting season. Beto excitedly agrees, and Ars thinks to himself that while he hopes his brother will work diligently, he's anxious, knowing Beto's tendency to slack off at home to go play. Ars decides that if Beto causes trouble or shirks his responsibilities, he won't hesitate to let him go. Curious, Ars asks his brother what's motivating him to help. Beto confesses he wants a Valkyrie of his own, feeling it's unfair that Ars is the only one with a working beast to ride. Ars recalls that he's caught Beto attempting to ride Valkyrie without permission and notes his brother's deep admiration for the creatures. Beto explains that riding a Valkyrie stirs dreams of heroism. Many legendary heroes have ridden Valkyries to save princesses, a thought that captivates him, and so Ars officially hires his brother. Beto wastes no time visiting Ars's hideout, though he's unimpressed with what he finds. Declaring it looks like a jail in the middle of an empty field, Beto criticizes the setup as lacking appeal. Ars clenches his fists, noting how his brother's first reaction was to belittle his employer's building style. Ars stands outside, hands placing on the ground, releasing a deep breath. He muses that each day brings growth, making it an ideal time to test his skills. With an interest in architecture, Ars recalls a recent stay at a hostel during a visit to the town of Fontana, where he meticulously studied the building's structure. But he didn't rely on sight alone. He used his mana to perform an intensive scan, channeling it into the bricks, letting it disperse thinly across the entire structure. In this heightened state, he activated his memory preservation magic, creating a precise internal blueprint of the building's layout. The first attempt to scan an entire building had drained him, as he had mistakenly spread mana throughout both walls and empty spaces. His revised approach, focusing mana only through the bricks, enabled him to memorize the building's structure without error. Now, confident that avoiding empty spaces would conserve his mana, he aims to recreate the hostel in one go. Ars begins by channeling mana into the soil to produce the bricks needed for construction. Then, relying on his blueprint, he reshapes the mana into the building's form. Finally, he replaces the mana structure with actual bricks and mortar. The result is a successfully replicated hostel, though its structure was slightly unstable compared to the original, which had the support of adjacent town buildings. To address this, Ars builds 2 extension walls, one as a stable for the Valkyries and another as storage for his harvests. The extensions lack roofs for now, requiring additional work to cover them. Despite being unable to replicate the hostel's wooden doors and furniture, Ars is pleased. His replicated building, modeled after a professionally designed structure, is considerably sturdier than his previous hut, providing him a solid sense of achievement. The success in creating a structure so robust in a single attempt is undeniable proof of his progress. Ars feels excitement building as he prepares to move into his new base. Just as he's about to step inside, his father approaches with a serious look, asking for a moment of his time. Concerned, Ars listens closely as his father explains that the issue involves the lumberjacks. The matter leads Ars to seek out Maddock, a seasoned lumberjack who's been supplying him with logs for magical mushroom cultivation. Early in the morning, Ars stands before Maddock, explaining that he's heard the lumberjacks disapprove of his independent tree-cutting activities. Maddock, already familiar with Ars's work, agrees to discuss the matter, and the two sit down on nearby tree trunks. Maddock, taking a swig of liquor, mentions its quality is quite good, and Ars explains that it was a souvenir from his recent town trip. Ars brought the liquor to Maddock on his father's suggestion. Maddock reveals that while furious might be an exaggeration, the lumberjacks are indeed displeased with Ars's activities. Ars assumes their frustration stems from his excessive tree cutting and offers potential solutions that he would start cutting trees outside their designated areas or venture deeper into the forest. Maddock corrects this assumption, explaining that the core issue isn't simply about earnings, it's about pride and dignity. Although Ars's mana-infused techniques might speed up the work, they unintentionally undermine the lumberjacks' craftsmanship and tradition, values they hold in high regard. Listening closely, Ars realizes he never intended disrespect. Maddock elaborates, describing how lumberjacks are deeply connected to their work, seeing trees not just as resources but as treasures. To them, indiscriminate felling, especially when the wood is left to rot, feels like a disregard for their way of life. Recognizing this, Ars understands that his rapid development efforts have overshadowed the impact on those around him. Reflecting on Maddock's perspective, Ars considers that his father may have been trying to alert him to this rising discontent. He realizes he's been so focused on his projects that he overlooked the perspectives of others affected by them. Observing Ars in deep thought, Maddock respects that despite Ars's remarkable abilities, he still takes time to consider other viewpoints. Suddenly inspired, Ars looks at Maddock with a new idea. He suggests that Maddock join him in his efforts, hoping to introduce a cooperative spirit into his development plans. Maddock is momentarily startled by the invitation, while Ars, full of enthusiasm, thinks that forest management could help foster this collaboration, merging his ambitions with respect for the lumberjacks' work. Ars thinks about the vast forest to the north of the village, noting how wide it is that those who wander too far into it have never returned. Yet, no one really knows the exact size of the forest itself. However, with a combination of his mana and the Valkyries, he believes they could significantly reduce its expanse. Deforestation poses a serious environmental issue. The soil would lose its ability to retain water and the necessary nutrients for growing agricultural crops. If this problem escalates, the entire region could face desertification in the future. The most immediate concern is the potential shortage of firewood. Without enough firewood for heating, survival through the harsh winter would be impossible. Ars explains to Maddock that they need to create a manageable man-made forest, thinking about starting a forestry initiative. By planting trees with adequate spacing between them, they can ensure each tree absorbs enough sunlight, resulting in a stable supply of high-quality wood. This approach could also yield high-quality logs for growing magical mushrooms as a byproduct. While Ars has experience growing vegetables and wheat, he admits he lacks sufficient knowledge of forestry. He believes it would be incredibly helpful to have experts like Maddock and other lumberjacks assist him in this endeavor. This arrangement would advance his development plans while satisfying the lumberjacks who love and protect the forest. Maddock voices concerns about humanity's handling of natural forces. Ars counters that managing the forest comes with clear advantages. Maddock agrees to discuss the idea with others. Ars senses that the other lumberjacks might be suspicious of his proposal, but Maddock manages to persuade them, emphasizing that this arrangement is better than letting Ars act without guidance. Ultimately, they reach an agreement that allows the lumberjacks to monitor the situation. As a result, the area north of the village falls under Ars's jurisdiction, a consensus shared throughout the village. The scene shifts, and Maddock presents some logs to Ars. Ars notes the abundance of logs available for cultivating magical mushrooms, and realizes that with this many, he can greatly expand his cultivation rate. He leaves the actual management of the forest to Maddock. Next, Ars moves to his hideout and reflects on the wooden furniture, like cupboards and doors, which he entrusted to expert woodworkers. He also left the radish and vegetable fields to his brother Beto. When Ars steps into the fields, he's surprised to see an increased number of people working there. Beto seems to be really good at organizing others. Curious, Ars asks one of the workers about Beto's whereabouts, and the person replies that Beto went to practice riding the work beast. Ars realizes that the people gathered are helping to shoulder Beto's workload. He feels the need to apologize to them, but one worker reassures him, saying they benefit from a share of the harvest. This includes children who lost their parents due to war and people like him who are unemployed because of a lack of jobs in the village. Ars thinks that if it were up to him, he would have only considered rewarding those he hired with payment, but he admires Beto's approach. Thanks to this shift, Ars can concentrate on development, hatching work beasts, and cultivating magical mushrooms. Suddenly, with the increasing number of people working on the project and his growing insights, he feels like he has matured. Now, at 8 years old, Ars is eager to embrace the changes ahead. The scene shifts, placing Ars in the fields alongside Beto and Maddock. He's taken aback to learn that the fields have been ravaged. Beto points out the boar footprints scattered across the area, explaining that they've found signs of 2 adult boars and even infant tracks. Maddock adds that it appears an entire family of boars was drawn to the radishes. Ars, noting this discovery, casually remarks that it's fine if it isn't a major problem. But Baito quickly rebukes Ars for his calm demeanor, insisting that this is indeed serious. People are so fearful of the boars that they're even refusing to work. Ars recalls similar issues with boars ravaging fields in his past life, despite traps and other efforts. The boars were clever enough to avoid traps, making the problem difficult to resolve. Recently, he's heard villagers talking about boars being spotted near the village, and the cause seems obvious. His expansion into the forest has disrupted the ecosystem. Trees were thinned to protect the area, but now some sections have been cleared for development. This change has strained the food chain, displaced animals, and left certain species without territory. As a result, the boars, having developed a taste for the crops, are now raiding the fields. Ars realizes that if this issue isn't addressed, the next generation of boars will continue to devastate the crops, posing an ongoing threat to the village's food supply. Understanding his duty as overseer, he knows he must find a solution to protect both the fields and those working in them. They hide in a cart set up in the fields, waiting quietly for the boars to appear. Soon, 2 massive adult boars emerge, accompanied by their young, stepping confidently into the field. Ars observes them, taken aback by their size, noting how enormous they are. Beto adds that even arrows can't pierce their skin, leaving Ars stunned by the revelation. Ars quickly asks, surprised, if this is truly the case and what they should do next. Beto, unfazed, insists that Ars come up with a solution. Considering their options, Ars suggests that they could reach out to the aristocrats for help in exterminating the creatures. However, Maddock counters, reminding them that the aristocrats would likely refuse and leave the problem for them to solve on their own. Ars contemplates, realizing they'll need to think of another approach. The scene shifts to Ars standing in the field, mounted on Valkyrie, preparing to face the boars. He steadies himself and signals Valkyrie to proceed as they had planned. From a distance, he observes the massive size of the boar and steels himself for the confrontation, fully aware that a direct charge or a clash with its powerful fangs would be disastrous. As he grips the reins, Valkyrie waits, her calmness helping Ars steady his nerves. With a silent understanding, Valkyrie bolts forward, the sound of the wind sharp against Ars's ears as they pick up speed. Aiming from Valkyrie's back proves challenging, so he decides to use his scattershot spell. Grasping a handful of stones, he releases them with the spell, sending them flying at high speed toward the boars. Ars notes that while he hasn't fully perfected the spell, he's starting to get a clearer picture of its function and purpose. Yet, he realizes his magic is somewhat weaker without direct contact with the soil. Suddenly, the boars roar and begin chasing after them, prompting Ars and Valkyrie to head into the forest. As they gain distance, Ars notes the speed of their pursuers, recognizing the challenge of keeping the pace while maintaining a safe gap. Everything is proceeding as planned, but he knows that his scattershot is only a part of their strategy. Just then, Valkyrie uses a physical enhancement spell and leaps forward, taking Ars by surprise with the sheer height they achieve, soaring high enough for him to glimpse birds flying beside them. Feeling Valkyrie's clear understanding of his intentions, Ars regards her as a truly reliable partner. When they land with a heavy impact, the terrain shifts, revealing a massive deep trench in the forest floor. The boars, caught off guard while chasing them, tumble into the trench. Ars surveys the scene and assumes they likely didn't survive the fall. Reflecting on the strategy, he considers that the only way to defeat such beasts was by combining his earth-based magic with Valkyrie's incredible speed. He pats Valkyrie and suggests they head home, and she nods in agreement, ready to return. This was Ars's first battle, and this is how it came to an end. Maddock stands in shock, unable to believe that Ars actually managed to defeat the giant boar. Beto is visibly pleased by the outcome, but Ars reassures them that things should be fine now. However, Beto looks at Ars with a knowing expression and asks what he means by that, revealing to Ars's dismay that there isn't just one giant boar causing chaos. Ars freezes at the realization as Beto explains that more of these great boars are ravaging the fields, and if any more appear, the task of handling them will fall to him. Inwardly, Ars can't help but fume at his brother's casual tone. He thinks back on the terror and difficulty of facing the massive beast, knowing he risked his life in the process. Yet, from that moment on, it became his duty to deal with the great boars each time they appeared. Ars is shown practicing his scattershot spell, realizing that long-range attacks are necessary to keep those giant boars at a safe distance. By defeating his first giant boar and a few others, he's honing his magic attacks. He's able to fire multiple stone shots shaped into arrowheads, even managing accurate shots while riding Valkyrie. Although the power diminishes over distance, he can shoot effectively from 20 to 30 meters away. The process of solidifying scatter shot into a formal spell is going well, but it's still not powerful enough to kill a boar on its own. Preparing a huge pit for each encounter is tedious, so Ars considers an alternative, building a defense to protect the fields instead. Ars thinks about using a sturdy fence like the defensive wall around the village, noting the wisdom in creating barriers to ward off external threats. He decides to build walls along the border between the forest and the field, including areas planned for future cultivation. These walls would serve as a reliable safety barrier for the workers. He recalls the damage left on his previous makeshift traps after the boars rammed them, concluding that the new defense walls must hold against boars up to 3 meters in size, giving people enough time to escape if necessary. Ars begins by creating 5 by 5 meter blocks for the wall. The walls are thick, filled with sand inside for added density, though he's unsure if this structure will withstand the pressure. He can only make 5-meter wide sections at a time, so he plans to connect multiple blocks. Ars reflects on his expanding mana capacity, which seems to grow every time he builds something, giving him confidence to attempt larger creations. Turning this wall-building technique into a spell would simplify the task, but solidifying a spell takes time. To imprint a spell, he has to cast the same magic repeatedly while chanting to preserve the image and conditions. It took months to figure out how to create the brick spell, requiring him to chant over and over. However, wall creation proved easier than scatter shot, likely due to his experience building the hostel. By channeling his mana into the structure and casting memory preservation, he's able to replicate the magic consistently, resulting in a faster learning curve. Now that the wall creation spell is ready, Ars brings 5 horned Valkyries, who, after their naming, can also replicate spells he's mastered. Together, they start constructing the wall, taking occasional breaks to eat magical mushrooms for mana recovery, which proves effective. Eventually, Ars manages to complete a sturdy 4-kilometer, 4-sided wall around the fields. Ars shows the wall to Beto, who examines it by knocking on it and checking its quality. Beto admits it's amazing but points out that he can't see where the entrance to the fields is. Ars's eyes widen as he realizes he hadn't thought about an entrance. Beto suggests making a road leading to the entrance to make it easier to find. Ars agrees and thinks it's a good idea. Ars reflects on how he's actually tried making roads before, though without much success. He decides to take this chance to create a proper road and sets up 2 entrances, one towards the village and another towards the forestry area. Reflecting on the road itself, Ars considers that concrete and asphalt look nice but require high maintenance. He recalls a type of road from his past life that could last over 1,000 years. The cobblestone streets made by the ancient Roman Empire. He remembers the basic steps, digging a hole the width of the road, filling it with rocks and gravel, topping it with clay, and finally laying down stone pavers of a certain thickness on top. Elevating the center of the pavement and covering the whole area adds a slight incline, which helps with drainage and prevents the road from collapsing. However, paving in a straight line is essential, as even a slight error in the angle calculation could lead to a huge deviation from the destination. Ars manages to construct the road. Though he's not entirely sure how to maintain it, he figures it won't be a problem if he turns it into a spell with the Valkyrie's help. Ars is sitting in thought when he hears a voice from behind. Turning, he sees Carl, the youngest sibling who recently finished his naming session. Noting it's rare for Carl to be here, Ars greets him. Carl explains he came to hang out after helping home, and mentions how Ars and Beto are always so busy that they come home late. Carl, noticing Ars's frown, asks what he's thinking about. Ars admits that the window glass he made didn't sell at all. Carl mentions the transparent boards piling up in the storage room, something their mother has been complaining about. Ars reflects on how he got the idea for this product while wandering through town, but Carl suggests that people here aren't interested in changing their way of life. Ars realizes, in a barter-driven economy, people won't spend money on non-essential items, even if they're high quality. Carl then shares that if he could choose, he'd like to have the beautiful furniture in Ars's room, something he admired on his last visit. Ars mentions that it was crafted by skilled lumberjacks, but Carl, drawn to the strong scent of the wood, points out that the lumberjacks don't sell their furniture. Ars wonders if it might be because furniture is too heavy to transport, but Carl explains that villagers take good care of their furniture and don't need replacements. Selling in town could be an option, but only if people could afford a work beast to pull a cart. Impressed by Carl's insight, Ars realizes the potential in this idea. Considering it further, Ars thinks selling furniture could be interesting and decides to speak with the lumberjacks about it. Carl is supportive, hoping the plan works out. Ars reflects on how he's always wanted to create something that didn't rely on his magic. Now that he's expanded his lands and created a surplus, he wants to help others in the village achieve steady incomes too. To make this happen, Ars knows he'd need to build a workshop and hire people to produce furniture, effectively starting a company. Carl is impressed by Ars's ambitions, and he admires how much Ars has accomplished. Ars reassures Carl that he'll also be able to do great things in the future, but for now, he should keep playing and enjoying his youth. Carl, smiling, points out that Ars is only 2 years older and technically still a kid himself. He also expresses his wish to learn magic, recalling how Ars has been teaching Beto. Reflecting on his past attempt to teach Beto, Ars remembers how their mother wasn't pleased, prompting Carl's curiosity about what had happened back then. Ars remembers, it happened back when he was trying to improve the quality of radishes in the backyard. Beto brother had come over and questioned him, wondering how he could carry such heavy weights despite being smaller. That was when Ars began using physical enhancement magic, using his own body as a test subject to see how effective it was. He wanted to find out if others could experience the same effects, so he decided to teach Beto brother how to conjure mana and use it. Though Beto didn't have any aptitude for soil improvement magic, he quickly acquired the skill for physical enhancement magic. After learning physical enhancement, Beto continued practicing and built up his physical strength. He started getting into fights with other kids in the village, not that Ars knew exactly why, but it wasn't unusual for kids to start fights over something they didn't like. Beto became invincible among his peers, which some of the other kids resented. They even brought older kids as backup. But despite that, Beto continued to reign over them all. Ars tells Carl that, to be honest, with Beto brother's magic technique, he couldn't have enhanced himself to that extreme. He always had a larger body than the others. Ars actually thinks Beto was strong to begin with. However, Beto brother started coming home with more bruises. The older kids, unable to win one-on-one, began to gang up on him. Despite this, Beto brother didn't falter. He stood right back up, no matter how many times he was defeated. Through these fights, his battle prowess grew even further. Beto kept fighting and skipping out on work, despite countless warnings, to the point where their mother would burst into tears from time to time. At long last, there was no one left to oppose Beto brother in their village. Carl, surprised, asks if something like that really happened. Ars continues, saying that it was this experience that made him realize he shouldn't teach magic irresponsibly. But if Carl still wants to learn magic, he's willing to teach him. Carl, who is a smart boy, not like the musclehead Beto, responds with excitement, asking if it's really okay. Ars explains that, for example, by concentrating mana to the brain, one could increase memory, calculation speed, and thinking abilities. Ars intends to teach Carl magic that will make him smarter. To be honest, Ars reflects on his actions, but doesn't regret teaching Beto brother physical enhancement. Beto's skill at handling people in the village now is largely because of his fighting ability. However, Ars would rather have Carl focus on using magic to enhance his mind instead of his muscles. He wants Carl to learn how to read and calculate, aiming to prepare him as the administrator the village desperately needs. If Carl succeeds, he could really help Ars with his work. The scene shifts, and a foreign man stands in front of Ars, Carl, and their father. He introduces himself as Gran, a traveler engaged in the trade of items made from item creation magic. Gran mentions that he's heard rumors of this village subjugating giant boars, and has come to see if they're true. Ars, Carl, and their father are caught off guard by his accent, and seeing their surprise, Gran explains that everyone speaks like this in his hometown. Ars then asks if Gran is from the east. Gran confirms that he was born in the eastern lands, and Ars asks him curiously if it's an island country. Gran clarifies that it isn't an island, asking if Ars knows of a place like that. Ars admits he doesn't, and tells him not to worry about it. He then welcomes Gran, saying that while the carriages of the giant boar aren't fully intact, Gran is welcome to take a look. Gran expresses his gratitude and mentions he would like to meet the person responsible for subjugating the giant boar. Ars replies that he's the one who did it, surprising Gran, who didn't expect a child to be responsible. Ars explains that he used a trap and had a partner's help. Gran, still in disbelief, says he'd heard about fierce giant boars attacking a village near the northern forest. Ars assures him that the boars are indeed quite ferocious. As they talk, Beto joins in, commenting that, in the end, they're just really big boars, so he doesn't understand Gran's fascination. Gran explains that giant boars have the ability to cast hardened magic on themselves, which surprises both Ars and Beto. Ars realizes that this must be why they couldn't pierce the boar's hide with arrows. Gran confirms, adding that materials from creatures who can use magic are valuable for crafting items. For example, a weapon made from a giant boar's fang can be stronger than metal. Ars, excited, thinks to himself how lucky it was that he kept the fangs instead of discarding them. Gran explains that he travels in search of special materials for his item creation. Ars, filled with excitement, asks if Gran can really craft weapons from giant boar fangs. Gran confirms, and Ars eagerly asks if he could make a weapon for him, assuring Gran that he'll pay for it. The scene shifts, and Ars and Gran stand before the giant boar's fangs. Ars asks what Gran thinks about them, and Gran examines the fangs closely. With amazement, he remarks that it's incredible. This is a real fang from a magical beast, and Ars even managed to kill it while it was casting magic, leaving traces of mana on it. Ars is curious about the term traces of mana. Gran explains that subjugating a beast while it's casting magic results in higher quality materials, as the conductivity of mana in weapons made from these would be much smoother than in average weapons. Realizing the potential, Ars exclaims that they could make a very strong weapon from this giant boar's fang. Gran agrees, but then points out a problem. To process a magical beast's material into a weapon, they need the right facilities and a catalyst, neither of which are available in the village. Ars inquiries about what's specifically required. Gran explains that they need a furnace capable of handling high temperatures and a mana core from a magical beast as a catalyst. While Ars understands the need for a furnace, he's unsure about a mana core. Gran clarifies that a mana core is a rare part of a magical beast necessary for casting magic, making it a rare catalyst. Ars shows him a Valkyrie horn and asks if it could work as a substitute for a mana core. Gran carefully examines the horn, treating it almost like a precious artifact, and after a moment says he believes it could be used as a mana core. Ars is thrilled by the news. Surprised, Gran asks if these horns are from local work beasts. Ars confirms it, and he is surprised that Gran recognized it. Gran mentions that he's aware of work beasts capable of using magic, and has heard of places where people extract mana cores from these creatures for research. Ars is taken aback, realizing he wasn't aware that work beasts could use magic, and thinks about re-evaluating the value of his Valkyries and his relationship with the peddler if this was kept from him. With this new understanding, Ars tells Gran the last thing they need is a furnace that can withstand high temperatures. Gran agrees, but specifies that other materials and tools are still necessary, though a furnace is essential. Excited, Ars declares he'll try making a furnace. He thinks about the bricks he made, believing they might be more fire-resistant than clay, though he isn't sure about their heat tolerance until he tries. But for the chance of obtaining a weapon, he's willing to test it. Gran, however, cautions that even if they manage to build a furnace that can contain the fire, they'll need wind to increase the temperature, which means they'll need bellows. Ars, disheartened, points out that bellows are usually made from wood, which is outside his control since he can only work with soil. Gran, his eyes lighting up with excitement, encourages Ars, telling him that no good weapon can be made if they give up now, proposing they tackle it together. Ars, seeing Gran's passion, realizes he underestimated the dedication of a creator to his work. The scene shifts to Ars sipping a mana potion. He remarks that it tastes like tea and mentally runs through the recipe, drying the magical mushroom, boiling it, grinding it into powder, mixing the powder into boiling water, and stirring well, and then comes out a completed mana potion. Ars thinks it would be more like a mysterious elixir, but instead, it tastes like a tea he remembers from his previous life. Gran observes that, thanks to the charcoal, they could maintain a constant boiling temperature, which improved the potion's quality. Ars then asks what weapon Gran plans to make with the magical mushroom catalyst. Gran explains that he intends to create defensive armor this time. Using the fur of a giant boar, he'll craft leather armor, tanning the fur by soaking it in the mana potion for several days to turn it into a magical item. Although it won't be as powerful as the kugaken crafted from the boar's fang, it will be much sturdier than typical leather armor. Ars is impressed by Gran's versatility in item creation, and expresses his gratitude for Gran's presence in the village. Gran reminds Ars to prepare for several sleepless nights ahead. Ars thinks that while Gran is indeed remarkable, he's unaware of how he unintentionally robs people of sleep. Ars is glad he created a meditation spell in the past that helps recover from fatigue, as if he'd had a full night's rest, allowing him to keep up with Gran's relentless schedule. He reflects that without the spell, he would have collapsed from exhaustion by now. After days of work, the leather armor is finally complete, looking exceptionally well made. However, it's crafted in a larger size than Ars. Gran asks if that's all right. Ars replies that making it in his current size wouldn't be practical, since he wouldn't be able to wear it once he grows up. Ars remarks that the armor is an extra gift for his brother, Beto, since he's been a great help in the fields. He adds that he'll use the armor himself once it no longer fits Beto. Gran reassures him, promising to make a new one for Ars when the time comes. Gran then asks what they should create next, but Ars suggests they pause for now. He proposes that instead, Gran could teach his workers to make similar products. Gran agrees, though he admits he prefers creating new things himself. Thinking of something challenging that might ignite Gran's creativity, Ars makes a suggestion. He asks Gran to design a building with the limited bricks available, the same quantity Ars used to construct 2 store hostel buildings. This constraint would allow Ars to reproduce the building with his memory preservation magic, as long as it's within those limits. Ars tells Gran that if he can create a suitable housing structure for himself using these bricks, Ars could later recreate it with his magic. He adds that Gran may use mortar to maximize space efficiency within the structure. Intrigued by the challenge, Gran accepts, finding the restrictions an exciting twist. Ars watches as Gran begins his work, then thinks to himself that he has a few ideas he'd like to test on his own as well. Reflecting on the powerful Kugaken sword Gran crafted from the giant boar's fang and Valkyrie horn, Ars realizes that the material's unique properties allowed the sword to gain the harden ability. Inspired, he wonders if combining different materials might yield other magical effects. Gathering his resources, a fang from the great boar, a Valkyrie horn, heat-resistant bricks, magically infused clay, and mana potion, Ars sets out to experiment. His plan is to create more sturdy bricks, but using an unconventional approach. Typically, bricks are hardened before mixing with other substances, yet he decides to break down the bricks, mix them into clay, and apply heat afterward. Determined to leverage knowledge from his previous life, Ars decides to blend the powdered bricks with the horn, fang, and clay, adding boiled mana potion to the mix. To maximize his chances, Ars crafts several samples, each with varying proportions of the materials. After shaping each mixture carefully, he places them in the furnace, hoping for a breakthrough. Yet the initial trials result in a series of failures. Determined, Ars realizes he may need to adjust not only the amount of mana potion, but also the number of times he kneads the mixture, preparing to continue refining his technique. After numerous attempts, Ars finally succeeds in creating a remarkably sturdy brick. Examining its smooth, marble-like finish, he notes that this one stands apart from the reddish-brown bricks he previously made. He names it hardened brick and reflects on the impact of incorporating catalysts and specific materials, which elevated the quality far beyond his earlier work. Ars realizes this achievement fulfills a long-held goal, which was to create a brick as strong as metal. Despite his efforts, he had struggled to reach this level, often finding that his past life's knowledge and conventional methods held him back. By working through each stage by hand, he was able to break free from those limitations and push his skills further. Even though he succeeded with this brick, Ars considers it only the start of further experimentation. With a sense of satisfaction and ambition for what lies ahead, he casts memory preservation magic on the brick, ensuring that he can replicate its unique properties in the future. Ars places his hands on the ground, focusing his magic to recreate the brick. By applying principles similar to his building creation magic, he manages to craft a new spell he calls Hardened Brick Creation. Now, without needing horns or fangs, he can generate these hardened bricks purely through magic. As he uses the bricks to pave roads, he observes that the result diverges from the traditional Roman-style cobblestone he had envisioned. Instead, it resembles a smooth marble floor. To achieve the cobblestone effect, he realizes he would need a separate spell, Road Replacement. Despite his efforts, this spell doesn't quite work with hardened bricks. However, the even surface of the marble-like road turns out to be an advantage, providing a smoother path for carts. Ars decides to elevate the sides as a safety measure for pedestrians, enhancing the overall functionality of the road. The scene shifts, and Ars stands before a building crafted by Gran, feeling a surge of joy at its unexpected spaciousness. Gran explains that he incorporated numerous windows to save on building materials. He proudly points out that he's completed the project to Ars's specifications, incorporating an arched doorway and glass windows. He got the idea after hearing from Carl that Ars had left unsold glassware in the storeroom. Ars considers the use of arch architecture and realizes that Gran's design not only conserves materials, but also boosts the building's sturdiness, as stone materials are highly resistant to compression. This approach was a wise solution, combining durability with efficient use of resources. Ars compliments Gran, remarking on how spacious and open the building feels thanks to the windows. Gran, with a pleased smile, responds that he's glad Ars appreciates it. Eager to show his gratitude, Ars offers Gran any reward he might desire. Gran takes the opportunity to request the right to build his own house on the land. Surprised, Ars asks if he truly wants a home here. Gran explains that although he's a traveler, he would like a place to return to without concern, especially since he feels that life around Ars is filled with fascinating possibilities. Reflecting on his decision, Ars recalls how other villagers have asked to live within the walls surrounding the fields, requests he's been declining to maintain privacy, especially since the Valkyries reside in the area. But he recognizes that a creator as talented as Gran is a rare find, and granting his request feels right. With a smile, Ars agrees, allowing Gran to settle there. And so, Gran becomes the first person to reside in Ars's territory. Ars reflects on his eldest brother Hector's recent marriage, noting how unusual it is to marry at just 14, even in this world. With their house becoming increasingly crowded, Hector and his new wife have moved into an expanded section of the storeroom. In this society, it's common for the eldest son to inherit the house and land. If their father, the head of the family, were to pass away, Hector would receive both house and land, which would then pass down to his eldest child. If other siblings remain without jobs, they typically stay at home, serving as laborers for the family. Despite these customs, Ars deeply values the harmony within his family and wishes to stay with them for as long as possible. However, he's been planning his own independence since the age of 5. With this in mind, he resolves to leave his parents' home and embark on his own path. Ars and the Valkyries stand in the fields, ready to start preparing the land for development. First, he plans to move the base near the southern wall to the middle of the land. Next, he will recreate the housing designed by Gran, using the same amount of mana he used for the hostel, but swapping the materials from normal bricks to hardened bricks. Using the hardened bricks, he creates 4 1-kilometer walls surrounding his house. Ars paves roads starting from the middle using road placement magic, connecting them to the 4 outer walls. He intends to place Gran's house in the southern area near the road leading to the village. Gran, being a creation maniac, has already made his own house after Ars gave him a part of the land, so Ars decides to save the design with memory preservation as well. He builds a few hostel-type houses for Beto along the southern road. Beto wants to leave home, so he's sharing his new house with friends and renting out the extra rooms to people who want to work in the fields. Ars decides that the northeast forest will serve as the forestry area, where log management and charcoal production will take place. Lumberjacks like Maddock and woodworkers have already moved into the area, though it still needs development in the future. Lastly, the central area will be his house, which contains the living space for the Valkyries, as well as the cultivating grounds for magical mushrooms. He plans to keep the horned Valkyries confined to the middle area. This is how he proceeds with the development plan for the land. By the time he finishes preparing to move into his new house, he is already 9 years old. The scene shifts, and Ars is cooking food while the peddler stands behind him. He mentions he's heard that Ars gave away some land to a traveler, and asks why he didn't say anything about it to him. Ars replies that he doesn't think a peddler needs land. The peddler insists that he doesn't plan on being a traveling merchant forever. He wants to have his own shop too, which is exactly why he wants Ars to give him his own land as well. Ars points out that the peddler lied, saying there were no work beasts that use magic. The peddler responds that he didn't know they existed, and he also didn't know Valkyries use magic, so aren't they equally guilty? Ars thinks to himself that he knew the peddler would be fixated on Valkyries being able to use magic. He mentions hearing that work beasts capable of using magic are considered luxury products, but he's only sold Valkyries that had their horns removed, so none of them could use magic. Selling Valkyries that can use magic comes with many demerits. Ars tells the peddler that he will let him open a shop there. The peddler is thrilled and says he would love it if it was a food shop. Ars replies that he will think about it, admitting he trusts him to a certain extent. The peddler then shares that there's a rumor going around about a group of dangerous people in the area. Ars, surprised, asks what he's talking about, and the peddler clarifies that they are talking about him. He's considered dangerous. Ars is taken aback, asking how that could be when he's the pure and angelic one. The peddler suggests they not talk about how Ars evaluates himself for now. Ars protests, saying he hasn't done anything dangerous. The peddler explains that the nobles governing the area could be unsettled by the sudden appearance of a giant fortress surrounded by walls being built. It's almost tax payment time, so the tax collectors will be coming soon, and Ars needs to be prepared to answer their questions. Ars says, "I do have permission to govern this land, so it won't be a problem." Ars explains that the poll tax and land tax are collected every year in the form of wheat harvest. The villagers gather the wheat in one place, and the village head is sent as the representative to meet with the tax collector. Ars pays his taxes in gold, which is why the tax collectors come to his house to collect the payment. Because of this, he has to show them some hospitality whenever they visit during tax season. Usually they would just have a meal and collect the gold before going back, but this time the tax collectors said a requisition would be conducted on Ars's land north of the village by the Fontana family. Any object on the land, including personal belongings, will be considered the property of the Fontana family. Ars, at the north of the village, will be placed under the protection of the Fontana family. While all of this is happening, Ars thinks this was what the merchant was talking about. The tax collector tells Ars that there may be some dangerous individuals lurking in the area, and that he, who is raising work beasts, will be protected by this measure as well. Ars realizes how a rideable work beast can be considered a strategic item. He thinks that as a measure to protect beast breeders, this move might make sense to most people. Even though his freedom might be restricted, he would never have to worry about food or war. He would have a guaranteed livelihood. He thinks he might be happy about this if he were just an ignorant child living his whole life in a poor village. However, he is different. He has memories of a rich and free world, memories of his past life. He refuses to accept being livestock that only exists to incubate eggs. Ars hears a loud noise and thinks it came from the stable behind the house. He rushes to the stable, with one of the tax collectors following him, asking what the noise was. Ars ignores him and enters the stable, thinking Carl is in there. The tax collector enters right behind him. Inside, Ars sees Valkyrie and Carl lying on the ground, drenched in blood, side by side. A man with a bloody sword stands beside them, filled with anger. Ars calls out their name. The man turns toward him with his bloody sword, asking angrily what Ars wants. Does he plan to get in his way as well? The man explains that he just said he was taking the beast, and this kid jumped at him. Ars stands there, terrified, as the man tells him not to act so high and mighty before trying to hit him. The scene shifts to Beto entering a room where Carl is lying on a bed, unconscious, while Ars sits beside him, shaking. Beto asks if they are both okay. Ars replies that yes, he's fine, and that Carl is okay too. He's just unconscious. He thinks the Valkyrie protected him, explaining that Carl has a cut on his forehead, but his injury is light compared to the amount of blood loss. Beto asks about Ars, wanting to know if he's okay. Ars recalls how the man was about to hit him before he used his scattershot spell on the man and killed him. Ars tells Beto he's fine, adding that he doesn't have a single scar on him. Beto clarifies that he's not talking about physical injuries and decides to drop the topic. He informs Ars that their father will try talking to people who are willing to listen, and they will go together after Carl wakes up. Ars agrees, thanking Beto silently for not asking about it. He thinks to himself that he used scattershot and killed the man instantly. The peddler comments that he can't see how Ars is going to get out of this unscathed. Beto recalls that the only memories he has of his childhood are mostly the times when he was hungry. Due to the Great Famine, the harvest was reduced, and most of it went to tax payments. Amidst all that uncertainty, his 3-year-old brother Ars started working in the fields. Beto used to think Ars was wasting his stamina on something that wasn't going to grow. He thought Ars was stupid. Ever since he was little, Ars had always been strange. Beto didn't understand how he did it, but he succeeded in growing radishes. Not only that, but the dried-up land that was left for him turned into rich, fertilized soil. To top it off, Ars was stronger than Beto, who was 2 years older. Beto found that out when he tried to make Ars feel a little pain, so he would give him his radishes. Curious, Beto asked how Ars was so strong when he was even smaller than him. Ars taught him the method without a second thought. Beto didn't really understand anything too complicated, but apparently, the trick was to hold mana within the body to increase strength. He practiced body strengthening by helping out in the field while Ars steadily maintained it, expanding its size. Their field became the prettiest in the village. People started asking Beto's parents if Ars could maintain their fields as well, but Ars refused, saying he couldn't do it because he had other things to do. Because of that, everyone in the village said Ars was a bad person. The adults didn't show it, but they harbored ill will toward him. Beto admits that he doesn't understand what Ars is thinking most of the time. Even though Ars is almost better than him at fighting, he is still his younger brother. Beto had been beating up anyone who talked badly about Ars and planned to hurt him. He felt bad making their mother worry, especially since he sometimes came back beaten up after facing 5 people at once. Still, he couldn't overlook anyone who wanted to bully his little brother. Ars once told him that he sucked at punching and should focus more on moving his wrist. Beto trained with that knowledge and never lost again, not even to a dozen opponents or anyone older than him. As he became stronger, he gained more followers. He tried to fight Ars again after a long time but lost once more. At that time, Ars had incubated eggs of work beasts and offered them to the nobility, receiving his own land in return. He even defeated the giant boars that had almost destroyed their village. No one in the village ever spoke badly about Ars again after that. Beto practiced riding Valkyries and swordplay with a wooden sword every day. He needed to be strong enough to defeat the giant boar and not lose to knights because he was Ars's older brother. When other people saw Ars's magic capacity, they would say it was an amazing amount of magic. Beto would then exclaim that Ars had been hiding all of this and that he was amazing. He knew he could get stronger because of Ars. Ars addresses his father, brothers Beto, Madoc, the peddler, and Gran, saying he wants everyone to speak to the villagers and gather their forces. He explains that they need to tell the villagers the nobles are planning to take his land, along with everything and everyone on it, and that they intend to kill him and Carl. They are going to fight to protect their rights and themselves from the nobles and their tyranny, and he hopes they can relay this message to everyone. He adds that anyone who wants to stand up for themselves and their families will be given his magic as well as part of his land. Ars hopes they can appeal to the villagers' emotions to show the merit in helping him so they can gather as many people as possible. Bido says to leave it to him, while Maddock offers to speak to the lumberjacks. Ars expresses his hope that the peddler can gather information from the streets. The peddler agrees, saying he will check out the scale of the enemy troops. Ars tells him to be careful, and they shake hands. The peddler tells Ars not to die and then departs. As Ars thinks about opposing a noble while being a farmer, he realizes it's something out of the ordinary. He never lived with the intention of hearing that "don't die" phrase thrown at him. He knows he'll have to think of a backup plan if he can't manage to gather anyone. Ars is surprised by the number of people turning up. Vargas comments that they usually get 50 people drafted for war each time, and compared to that, 78 is quite a lot. The other lumberjacks share the same thoughts. They are sturdy and will be very helpful. Beta was really popular among the young men he fought with, as well as the poor who had gotten field jobs thanks to him. There are people who cannot survive without those field jobs. Ars explains that he has given the villagers who were willing to fight alongside Vargas the family name Baruka, allowing everyone to use magic. This naming created a strong sense of unity, as everyone was now named Baruka. To solidify this bond, he held a sparring match with Vargas, which allowed him to showcase his fighting abilities and unify everyone under the same cause, boosting morale among the fighters. Ars realizes that while some people might have considered abandoning him if they were at a disadvantage, the fight with Vargas changed that sentiment. Afterward, Vargas jokingly calls Ars General, which surprises Ars, who believes the villagers are coming together because of Vargas, and insists Vargas should be the general. Vargas, however, insists he's not fit for that role, but acknowledges the importance of his friends who are willing to fight alongside him. Ars reflects on how the decision to leave the village was correct, as they were trying to protect their friends, and heading toward Linda village was the right choice. They plan to camp at the river south of Baruka village, between the cities. Ars thinks about how the Fontana family must pass through this area to reach Baruka village. Though the river isn't very wide, it runs deep, with limited crossing points. Ars instructs everyone to spread out and use ground-leveling magic to prepare the camp, as he plans to build hostels on top. They follow his plan, and Ars constructs many hostels on the leveled land, allowing them to shelter more than 100 people, including reinforcements from Linda village. Ars announces they will next build defense walls. He notes that now everyone can use the same magic without him needing to teach it individually. His naming ceremony spell directly inputs all information about his magic into their minds. Anyone who is named by Ars can use all his spells, but some people struggle with the wall creation magic. It's not that they can't use it, they simply can't process the information of the spell. The same issue arises with road placement magic. Those who can't use these spells tend to have lower mana quantities. Wall creation, in particular, requires significantly more mana in a single use than other spells. If a spell requires more mana than a person possesses, the information won't process, and the spell won't be imprinted in their minds. Ars recalls that he also fainted when trying spells beyond his mana capacity. He's uncertain whether this limitation is a form of self-defense by the physical body or an aspect of how the magic circle works. But people can only learn spells within their mana limits. Ars plans to test whether they can use the spells later if they manage to increase their mana capacity. Gran tells Ars he has something to show him and reveals a leather armor he's crafted. Ars is genuinely impressed, noting that it's amazing work, especially considering it was done last minute. After the fight with Vargas, Ars realized that standing on the front lines without proper gear was too risky. Though he comments that the armor feels a little too light for his taste, he knows he can't afford to be picky on the battlefield. Ars also mentions he has entrusted the Kugakan to people close to him, like his father and Maddox's group, as they understand his intentions and can relay instructions to the rest of the villagers. He reflects that he has gathered reliable comrades, fortified their base, and resolved the lack of equipment issues. The peddler returns and informs Ars that the Fontana family has gathered 500 troops. Ars is surprised by the number. The peddler adds that he found out their schedule and route. Ars says only about 50 people are enlisted in Baruka village. To bring 10 times that amount shows the Fontana family may be underestimating Ars, but also sees him as a real threat. The peddler remarks on how Ars managed to build a base and gather people from neighboring villages, likely exceeding the Fontana family's expectations. Ars acknowledges that the difference in numbers is significant. He notes that to seize a castle, attackers typically need at least 3 times the number of defenders, and the Fontana family has gone far beyond that. Since they lack reinforcements, they wouldn't be able to withstand a prolonged siege. That's why they need to engage in an open battle instead. Vargas agrees, pointing out that their limited provisions and personnel would make it impossible to win by simply tightening defenses. He believes the Fontana family assumes they're just a ragtag group of farmers. In reality, they're a group capable of using battle magic, and if they can strike before the Fontana family develops a counter-strategy, they might stand a chance. Ars tells everyone they have only one opportunity: they must launch an ambush. He reflects on how terms like open battle and ambush once sounded cool in games, but now feel so much heavier in reality. At that moment, the Valkyrie approaches and affectionately rubs its face against Ars's back, and he explains to the others that the Valkyrie is cheering him on. Ars will live on with everyone else and acquire freedom. Ars, observing the Fontana army's metal-clad soldiers and formations that align with prior intelligence, notes their predictability as an advantage. A representative from the Fontana side, mounted on a hornless Valkyrie, accuses Ars of defying noble authority and harming a tax officer. He declares that if Ars surrenders, the villagers will be spared. Ars's brother urges him to respond before the villagers lose heart. Amplifying his voice with mana, Ars counters with a powerful speech, accusing the Fontana family of plotting to seize Baruka and oppress its residents through unfair taxes and starvation. He declares that Baruka's people will no longer tolerate the nobles' tyranny and urges them to fight for their freedom. Inspired, the villagers charge forward, catching the Fontana soldiers by surprise. Charging ahead with enhanced strength, Ars wields a spear made from hardened brick, sending soldiers flying with each swing. His unexpected power demoralizes the conscripted soldiers, allowing him to break through their lines with ease. Ars drives forward, knowing his true target is the Fontana commander, the key to winning the battle. Beto calls Ars' name from behind, telling him he's charging in too far alone. Ars is aware he's on horseback, but he is still putting too much distance between himself and the Baruka army. He thinks that with physical enhancement and scattershot, their soldiers are of much higher quality than the enemy's. Even as a kid, he can enhance his strength enough to send adults flying. He notices the enemy's magic seems much weaker than he expected, reasoning that it's likely because he's been refining his mana pool since he was a baby by drawing mana from the air and his food, while others rely only on the natural mana within their bodies, which is far weaker. Ars tells Beto and Vargas to come with him, instructing Dad and Maddock to lead the others in pursuit. Their goal is to target the armored group at the center of the enemy's formation. He sees himself, Beto, and Vargas as the main force and pillars of the Baruka army, just as those armored soldiers are likely the pillars of the conscripted enemy troops. He believes that breaking through them would crush the enemy's will to fight, but he doubts scattershot will have much effect on full-plate armor. These armored soldiers also seem to have far more mana than the others, so they're bound to put up a strong defense. Charging towards them, Ars swings his spear at them and then his hand slips, and the spear drops to the ground, leaving him briefly exposed. He quickly pulls out a sword as a fallen soldier yells at his comrades to get back up and not lose to a kid. Ars notes they weren't blown away as easily, though they're still weaker than expected. They have excellent equipment and far more mana than the conscripts, but the quality of their mana is still the same. By contrast, Ars's mana is thick and viscous, which he realizes greatly amplifies his power. Ars tells Beto they could each take out 10 men to make things easier, and Beto grumbles about their crazy general. At that moment, the enemy commander unsheathes his sword and advances toward Ars, remarking that he may have underestimated him and that his rebellion ends here. As they clash, the commander reveals he's the head of the Fontana family, Raymond, who rules over this land and recognizes Ars from his childhood, though he doubts Ars would remember him. Ars recognizes Raymond as the one leading the army, and there's no way he could forget him. Raymond was the one who cut off the horns of the Valkyrie Ars had presented to the Fontana family, and the same person who granted him the right to own land, only to now try to take everything away. He's the representative of the Fontana family, the one whose name was on the message from the tax collector. To Ars, Raymond embodies disregard for the honest labor of others. Beto calls out, telling Ars to calm down and look around. The armored soldiers are getting back up. Vargas notes that Raymond purposely revealed himself to stall Ars, costing him the momentum he had built up. The armored soldiers are preparing to cast a spell, reminding Ars that each noble possesses unique and powerful magic. This ability is what grants them the right to rule, allowing them to conscript and grant magic to skilled warriors, though not without risk of betrayal. For commoners to receive magic, they must first prove themselves on the battlefield and become sworn warriors, then work as a knight squire to receive approval. If they fail or are weak in magic, they could lose their last name and be banished from their family. Ars reflects that what he did in Baruka exploited this system. His last name, Baruka, symbolizing earth magic, while the Fontana family's magic is based on ice. The Fontana soldiers cast ice lance under Raymond's command, launching their attack. Ars realizes they're surrounded and can't defend alone, so he relies on Beto and Vargas to watch his back. Filling the Kugaken with mana and using physical and sight enhancement, Ars prepares to strike down the incoming spells. The world seems to slow as he focuses, splitting his mana between the two enhancements, a challenging but manageable task. He notices the enemy's Ice Lance spell functions similarly to his own Scattershot. Vargas is taking damage, hardening his sword and body, but not immune to injury. Since dodging would put Ars and Beto at risk, Vargas endures the hits, impressing Ars with his resolve. Back when Ars gifted Raymond the Valkyrie, he could only watch as they cut off its horns. Now, he's much stronger and has reliable comrades by his side. Beto, noticing the assault has finally ceased, praises the Valkyrie's effort, then jumps off when he sees it's hit by an Ice Lance, charging toward the knights. Ars asks Vargas to cover Beto, knowing that Beto's Kugaken and physical enhancement alone won't be enough to penetrate the knight's armor. But to Ars's surprise, Beto's strength allows him to smash through the armor, revealing a strength Ars hadn't noticed before. With Beto drawing attention and Vargas covering his back, Ars sees an opportunity to end the battle. Raymond, surprised by Ars's strength and magical sword, comments on his enhancements and wonders how he acquired such power. Ars dismisses his question, sensing Raymond still believes he holds the upper hand. Raymond then expresses regret that he can no longer persuade Ars to step down, and Ars realizes Raymond isn't just a figurehead. Raymond's sword exudes an incredible amount of mana, much more than the Kugaken. Raymond declares this will be Ars' end and charges, his sword engulfed in ice. When their swords clash, Ars is shocked to see his blade break as Raymond reveals the Ice Spirit sword. The blade coats Raymond in ice, putting Ars at a disadvantage due to its greater reach. Every time Ars cuts into the ice, it regenerates, worsening his position. Though enhanced with mana, Ars is being pushed back, ultimately falling from his Valkyrie. He realizes he can't outrun Raymond on foot, so he uses Scattershot to target Raymond's horse, forcing him down to equal footing. Though Raymond's enhancement is still stronger, Ars knows this is his chance. Preparing to strike, he's interrupted by knights rushing in to save Raymond, ruining the opportunity. Ars swings at them, frustrated by their coordination and the power required to break through their armor. Despite their strength, he feels he can still manage by redistributing his mana carefully. Ars, drenched in sweat after defeating all the knights, feels the weight of exhaustion pressing down, but knows he can't let his guard down just yet. Raymond, noticing Ars's fatigue, steps forward and remarks that Ars must be out of stamina. He urges Ars to stop his futile resistance, but Ars counters, saying that Raymond is the one who should surrender. Suddenly, the ground begins to tremble, surprising everyone. Smiling, Ars reveals that Raymond has fallen into his trap. Meanwhile, Peddler guides a group of Valkyries toward the battlefield, instructing them to follow the river. Ars had anticipated that a typical surprise attack wouldn't suffice, especially with limited forces to deploy. But now he set his powerful trump card into motion. Raymond realizes with shock that Ars is flanking him with Valkyries, beasts of burden that charge onto the battlefield, causing the ground to shake. Ars calls for the Valkyries, and they burst into the fray, using the Scattershot spell against Raymond's troops. Witnessing these creatures wielding magic identical to Baruka's, the Fontana soldiers are stunned and thrown into disarray. In mere moments, Raymond's army is decimated. In disbelief, Raymond exclaims at the destruction of his army and refuses to accept such a defeat. Taking advantage of Raymond's shock, Ars lunges forward, piercing Raymond's chest with his sword. As Raymond collapses, Ars declares it's over. It's clear to everyone that this is a decisive victory. Ars raises his sword, proclaiming with a powerful voice that he has slain Raymond, the Fontana family's representative, and orders the Fontana soldiers to withdraw, announcing Baruka's newfound freedom. With cheers erupting around him, a Valkyrie nuzzles Ars, and he reassures it, saying he's fine. With Baruka's victory, the people celebrate in the camp. The Peddler, standing beside Ars, expresses his fear during the battle, especially about using physical enhancement while riding a galloping Valkyrie. Ars reflects that the lead Valkyrie was the one he had partnered with since the beginning, and commends the Peddler for guiding the charge, which only he could have done aside from Beto. The Peddler, impressed by their efforts, warns Ars that the Fontana family has more troops. Ars acknowledges they still have a larger army, but explains they gained crucial advantages, such as weapons abandoned by fleeing conscripts, as well as about 200 defectors joining Baruka and Linda, thinking they now held the upper hand. Most importantly, they've secured valuable information. Vargas approaches and confirms the captured knights, who have fought together since they were commoners, were willing to talk. Ars reflects that the 6 captured knights are invaluable for intelligence, revealing that Fontana's forces comprise 5,000 conscripts, with the ability to raise about 7,000 to 8,000 more. Failing to quash the 2 rebelling villages would be a major embarrassment for Fontana, potentially inviting interference from other nobles. Realizing this would be a war of attrition, Ars stresses the importance of displaying their strength to deter future conflicts. To establish their power, Ars proposes building a castle as both a defensive stronghold and a symbol of authority. While the world lacks advanced sciences, castle construction is generally rudimentary here, so he suggests adding a moat by the river. Gran agrees, noting their current walls need improvement to meet castle standards. He explains they'll need stairways to the top, a secondary defensive wall, and watchtowers at each corner. Ars, with memory preservation magic, decides they can replicate each tower once they've built one. With a castle underway, Ars plans to construct roads for better supply routes from the villages, and build protective walls for Linda as well. He organizes the workforce into teams based on their magic levels to streamline the construction. Gran expresses surprise at being involved in castle building, remarking on Ars's reputation. Ars teases that Gran only joined him for the freedom to indulge his own ambitions. Together, they vow to build a castle that will impress even nobles. Eventually, the castle is completed, with roads linking Baruka and Linda villages and a wall surrounding Linda. Ars is pleased with the watchtowers, noting they provide clear sightlines without needing magic techniques. He finishes by saying they first focused on everything outside the castle itself. Ars is outside with his Valkyrie when Beto arrives, informing him that more people have shown up, wanting to join their cause. Ars reflects that with the newly built road, people can now travel between the villages and the castle within a day, which has led to a steady increase in their ranks. Just then, someone informs Ars that he's received a message from Baruka village. Father Paulo wants to see him. Hearing this, Ars becomes uneasy and admits he doesn't want to meet with Father Paulo. The scene shifts to Ars, sitting across from Father Paulo. Paulo greets Ars, commenting on all he's accomplished in his absence. Ars plays innocent, wondering what Paulo means, and Paulo warns him not to be evasive. It's about the naming, which Ars has been performing without the church's permission. Paulo begins to explain the truth of magic and naming in their world. In this world, all people, whether powerful or ordinary, have mana, but only those able to utilize mana become known as magicians. In ancient times, a magician could perform magic simply by chanting words, which led to the creation of spells, and those who wielded them became known as wizards. Then came the Magus, who invented the naming system, making magic accessible even to commoners. The Magus declared that naming was a divine gift, forming the foundation of the Holy Light Church. Naming, Paulo explains, establishes a parental bond, transferring a portion of mana from the child to the parent. This, Ars realizes, explains the rapid growth of his own mana. Paulo reveals that only high-ranking church officials know this secret technique, and Ars's unsanctioned use of it risks angering not only local nobles, but also the church itself. Ars panics, fearing the consequences, but wonders if there's leniency since the naming ceremony is common when promoting knights. Paulo clarifies that the church oversees noble naming ceremonies, ensuring they control mana flow and prevent mana hoarding. These ceremonies also include offerings to the church, essential for maintaining social and economic order. Ars scoffs, remarking it sounds like they're taking money, and Paulo counters that it's simply a token of gratitude to God. Ars then realizes that if mana flows from child to parent, his mana could be feeding Paulo's as well. Paulo confirms, saying his mana has indeed increased since naming Ars, which recently led to his promotion from priest to bishop, granting him rule over the entire region. He also gained access to healing magic, which he describes as a divine revelation, feeling as though God himself granted him new abilities. Paulo concludes by proposing that Ars entrust his future to him. Paulo sits with Ars, laying out his current situation. Ars has killed soldiers of the tax collector, incited farmers to rebellion, attacked a neighboring village, fought a major battle against the Fontana army, captured 6 knights, and is illegally occupying land. Ars protests, saying Paulo is making it sound worse than it is. But Paulo adds that he's also misused the church's secret naming ceremony and spread aggressive magic recklessly. Ars considers his position. He has just cause for the war against the Fontanas, but no excuse for unauthorized naming. He wonders if joining the church might help, but Paulo dismisses this, explaining that he'd be expelled immediately for using offensive magic. Paulo continues, pointing out that Ars's main problem is his conflict with the church. However, he offers a solution. Paulo could claim he was the one who named the villagers of Baruka, presenting it as a legitimate act under church authority. Ars is suspicious, wondering why Paulo would help, and Paulo explains. His rank increased thanks to Ars's mana, but he could lose his position if Ars dies. Additionally, Ars's misuse of the naming spell could reflect poorly on the church, so maintaining a good relationship benefits him. Paulo hints that small inaccuracies in church reports are not uncommon. Still, he cautions that they can't simply ignore Ars's actions. They've been too public, and Ars needs to give alms. Ars realizes that nobles usually offer almsgiving when naming others, and that Paulo needs compensation to support the story. Ars reluctantly agrees to pay, shocked when he sees the amount Paulo demands, which would consume nearly all his savings. Paulo responds that if Ars can afford it, then the payment is reasonable. Ars suspects Paulo calculated the amount based on his total wealth, but he hesitates, recognizing he can't spend his entire fortune on resolving only the church's issues. He insists that unless Paulo also has a way to deal with the Fontana family, he can't commit to this. Paulo agrees, turning their focus to the Fontanas. He asks Ars to consider their perspective. Their primary concern isn't simply defeating Ars, but understanding the root of the rebellion. Most people can't use magic, and even fewer can grant it to others. To the Fontanas, it would seem like a rival noble empowered the farmers to rebel. Paulo offers to clarify this, explaining to the Fontanas that no noble is behind the uprising. Rather, it was a response to someone's attempt to seize land. He would also assure them that the naming was done under his authority, as Ars's request. Ars questions the risk to Paulo, but Paulo reminds him that he performed Ars's baptism, which should suffice to justify his involvement. With his recent promotion to bishop, he now oversees all churches within Fontana territory, giving him the leverage to negotiate an agreement. However, groundwork is required, something Paulo can't achieve without Ars's donation. Ars, after consideration, entrusts the fate of Baruca to Bishop Paulo. A group of nobles stroll together, gossiping about Paulo's recent promotion to bishop. They discuss how he oversaw the naming of Baruca's villagers and has a close association with Ars. One of them notes in surprise that Paulo, now a bishop, would go so far as to cover for Ars. They conclude that Ars must hold some significance if the church is willing to extend such protection on his behalf. Paulo arrives in a carriage and informs Ars that he has almost finalized the arrangements with the Fontanas. However, the resolution will require a direct discussion between both parties. They agree to hold the meeting in a neutral location. Ars reflects that it will be an informal discussion, so he has had one of the towers built along their road cleared of people for this purpose. A man approaches Ars looking at him and saying, "So you are Ars Baruca." Ars thinks that this is within their territory, but the man barely brought any people with him. Is he looking down on me? The man introduces himself as Carlos Fontana, the head of the Fontana family. Ars glances back at the bishop, thinking dismally that he should have informed him about this. Carlos sits in a chair in front of Ars while Ars stands. Carlos mentions that the bishop has told him everything. They will overlook Ars's annoying little uprising and suggest ceasing the fighting. Ars responds that he can't agree to that so easily and has demands. Carlos retorts that not only is Ars not kneeling in front of a noble, but he also dares to have demands. He comments that this is typical of someone at the heart of a rebellion. Carlos hands a paper to Ars proposing terms for peace. Ars takes a look at the document, noting that it states he will have to sever ties with the Fontana family, but in return, they will grant him knight status. He finds these conditions fairly favorable. Ars asks Carlos if he will really keep these promises. Carlos assures him that there are some details to work out, but the treaty is official and he won't overrule it. He explains that if he did something so heinous, his subordinates would abandon him. Ars reminds Carlos that he is the one who killed his representative, which makes it strange for Carlos to want him as a subordinate. Carlos, however, responds that he is quite grateful to Ars for killing Raymond, laughing as he says so. He acknowledges that while Ars is still a kid, he has experienced the difficulties of raising an army. Carlos shares that 3 years ago, his father, the previous head of the family, died. His father was a great man who held a lot of sway with the surrounding nobles and was known as the Winter General. The other nobles combined their efforts and managed to kill him, leaving a mere child in charge. A man from the Barbaros family, one of the knights serving Raymond, was elected to rule the land as the representative of the Fontana family. Carlos recognizes that this man did a lot to protect the land until he came of age, but during his tenure, he oversaw the death of the Graham family, an excellent knight family. The position of representative was originally supposed to circulate among the knight families, but Raymond wrestled it for himself, turning Carlos into little more than a puppet after he came of age. This means Raymond was also responsible for when Carlos had to present them with Valkyries. Ars realizes that Raymond was responsible for the mistake of giving him the right to the land. Carlos adds that he didn't expect Raymond to be killed while he was on his way to arrest him, leading Ars to note that Carlos was put back in power of the Fontana family. Carlos explains that it is not so simple and describes the hard work he put into consolidating the different powers in Fontana after Raymond died. Ars connects the dots, understanding why the Fontana family hasn't attacked them again yet. Carlos continues, explaining that Raymond's family and all his subordinates have been living comfortably. They are currently acting obedient, but he is certain they will rebel sooner or later, and Ars will be the one to put a stop to that. Carlos admits that while he is the head of his family, he doesn't have much support. Nevertheless, he believes he can stop Raymond if he has the power of the Baruca family. Carlos recognizes that Ars faced him as an equal, knowing full well he wields more power and authority. He notes that Ars doesn't have the mindset of a farmer, he has something to protect. This tells Carlos that Ars won't yield to any show of power, so he can only offer something of value to him, the lives of the people of Baruca, the wealth Ars has built up, and his freedom. As the head of the Fontana family, Carlos guarantees it all, in exchange for Ars being his sword. Ars thinks about Carlos's position, realizing it is not solid, but it still comes from the word of a lord. He appreciates that Carlos won't blame him for any wrongdoings. Most importantly, if he were to reject Carlos's offer out of nowhere, it would ruin his relationship with Bishop Paulo, who made this task possible. He also prefers not to be on bad terms with the church. With a decision made, Ars tells Carlos he has some conditions he would like to add. The secret meeting between Carlos and Ars continues late into the night. Bishop Paulo presents some papers, stating that this is the peace agreement they have negotiated, and asking if both parties agree to the terms. Ars and Carlos affirm their agreement. Paulo then calls Ars Baruca to step forward, asking if he swears to serve and support Carlos de Fontana, and Ars gives his oath. Paulo then addresses Carlos, confirming if he swears to employ Ars Baruca as his knight to help each other and fight together for the people, which Carlos affirms. As proof of their oath, Ars kneels in front of Carlos, who brings forward his sword to name Ars. Paulo casts a naming circle, and Carlos formally declares Ars Baruca as his knight, now known as Ars von Baruca, noting his anticipation for Ars to serve the Fontana family as their knight. After naming and forming a mana bond with Carlos, Ars reflects that Carlos now holds the most mana in his territory, which should help alleviate pressure from the Raymond faction. Ars notes that he and everyone connected through him gained something through the mana path as well. They can now use the ice magic of the Fontana family. No matter how hard he tried before, Ars could never use anything apart from earth magic. Now that the matter has been officially dealt with, he can finally return to his normal life. The scene shifts, and Ars is sitting in a room on a chair with a table in front of him, while Gran stands on the other side of the table. Gran asks if there's anything Ars wants to do now that he owns land. Ars ponders the thought. Gran continues, mentioning that not only did Ars get Baruca and Linda, but he even got to keep North River Castle. Ars thinks back, recalling how Carlos originally wanted to give him just Baruca. But after a lot of arguing that he couldn't let Vargas or North River Castle go, Carlos finally gave in. Ars reflects that although he became a knight, only a few knights actually hold territory, so he's genuinely surprised Carlos agreed. Gran clarifies, suggesting it's more of a need than a want, and asks if Ars knows what that is. Ars replies, saying he needs to earn money, as he can't afford to get swept up in Gran's fantasies now. While he has full rights to rule, raise taxes, and judge, these powers come with obligations. Ars realizes he'll need to pay taxes to the Fontana family, and if they request, he'll also have to raise levies for them. Currently, he doesn't have a way to provide food for his men if that happens. Failure to show loyalty could mean losing the territory he worked so hard to secure. Ars concludes that he needs to set up ways to generate income without direct involvement as soon as possible, and decides it's time to organize the internal administration. The scene shifts to a noble lady, Lilina, sitting on a chair reading a book. A servant girl approaches and inquires if something is troubling her. Lilina replies it's nothing, and asks the servant to bring her the next book. The servant agrees and steps away. Lilina reflects on the recent events. Raymond, who had consolidated and protected the territory since they were young, has died in a peasant rebellion. She believes Carlos is capable of managing his territory well, recognizing his talent. However, she worries about the powerful knights of the Raymond faction, who might resent being ruled by the relatively inexperienced Carlos, as their interests could clash. Knowing Carlos's intelligence, Lilina assumes he'll likely see the value in leveraging his only remaining blood relative for political stability. With this thought, she resigns herself to face whatever challenges may lie ahead. The scene shifts to Ars in a meeting, outlining roles and responsibilities. He assigns the merchant, Asan Tryon Baruca, to handle internal affairs alongside him. Since Tryon is literate and skilled in math, he'll be responsible for accounting. Ars appoints Bido and Vargas to serve under him as captains. Recognizing the need for funds to maintain a standing army, Ars decides they will focus on training peasants for now. For security, Ars entrusts the responsibility to his father. He plans to hire people to maintain order and intends to establish a straightforward rule of 3 strikes, and you're out to help manage peace and discipline. Ars tells his father that a few people are using offensive magic during peacetime, and he wants him to keep them under control. He acknowledges that it's a rough job but urges his father to do his best. His father feels the pressure. Maddock and the village chiefs of Baruka and Linda will serve as judges. If two people can't settle a matter, a trial will be held. There are no formal laws yet, and Ars knows it's difficult to grasp, but a person of authority will listen to both sides and make a judgment they can agree on. Over time, he plans to use the precedents set by these trials to establish law. The three of them are experienced and will carry out judgments on Ars's behalf, and he looks forward to their work. Gran will continue to be in charge of crafting. He's not really the type to manage an organization, so Ars will have to keep an eye on him. Lastly, for the rest of the team, Ars wants to personally hire people for odd jobs. When they built the roads and the castle, these individuals didn't just follow orders, they suggested even better ideas than he had in mind. So even though they may not be able to read, they are still smart. Ars plans to have any capable person work with all they have for the Baruka knighthood. They have access to meditation, so they can work without rest. This was the birth of the black company Baruka, and thus his territory management began. Osan tells Ars that he is a monster. The very first thing he does is take all his money. Ars thinks that since he is dead broke after paying the church, he first asked Osan to invest. Bishop Paolo was surprised that Ars had saved up so much money, so in other words, if the two of them do business together, they will both make off like bandits. Ars tells Osan he will give him some nice land. Just think of it as the price for that. Osan agrees, saying he will at least think of it as a valuable donation to his lord. He points out that while Ars has the basics down, he wonders if he will really be okay. Ars responds that he has risen from commander to noble, so management must be rough. Ars explains that he has established a mutual relationship with Carlos, but his subordinates and other nobles don't think well of him. He could easily be mobilized and sacrificed on the battlefield or something similar. He's sure many would advise Carlos to take back his territory if he messes up ruling it. Just having his land do okay won't cut it. He needs to make the Baruka knighthood the strongest force around. To do that, he first needs to get ahead by trading to make the money he needs. Ars suggests to Osan that they open a market. Osan, shocked, replies that nobody in their right mind would come this far out in the sticks to trade. All nobles are constantly squabbling with their neighbors, and just getting from one place to the next is hard. Every territory has its own checkpoints, and they need to pay a fee to cross. Plus, dealing with guilds is a hassle. Guilds charge excessive fees for everything from what you sell to where you sell it. And if you even think about conducting business without the guilds, they will have you erased. Ars counters that this limits the movement of goods and increases prices. He would be in big trouble if no money came around to the Baruka knighthood. So, wouldn't it be a great idea to create a free market where people can come and trade the goods he allows without guilds meddling in it? Osan still thinks it would be difficult since they still have to pay the fees in all the territories they pass to come there. Ars acknowledges that it will probably turn out just like Osan says. He has a lot of experience trading in this world after all. But still, he has to create a city and a system where merchants will gather of their own accord. Ars is brimming with determination. The first step is to make an easy passage here from Fontana City. Ars starts the construction of the road from Fontana City to Baruka Village. He notes that constructing a bridge over the river between Fontana City and Baruka Village was also part of the peace terms, so they will be hitting two birds with one stone. Baido is supervising this construction. He asks if the peace terms specified that the road has to be built for merchants. Ars replies that Fontana regards this as a road for the army, not for merchants. Beto points out that this means they are being incredibly suspicious of them. If they ever grow distrustful, they could just use that road to mobilize their forces faster. Ars acknowledges that Beto is right. Another one of the terms is keeping the number of soldiers stationed at North River to a minimum. Keeping North River Castle was actually the point he argued the most about with Carlos. Anyway, it's not like he wants to be on Carlos's bad side. He plans to make North River Castle an in-town connecting Fontana City and Baruka Village. Ars says I ordered the people who owned farms and could use magic to enlarge their fields when they got home, and I had others work on the roads. A few days later, the road that would greatly reduce travel time between Baruka Village and Fontana City was completed. With experienced workers, the construction went quickly, and Ars praised everyone for their excellent work. This marked the end of the road-building projects, causing some concern among the workers. One was a third son who wouldn't inherit anything, another needed a place to live, and one was running out of money with no work prospects. Ars reflected that part of a lord's duty was to ensure that even those without farmland had enough to eat. Ensuring housing, employment, and food stability would likely reduce crime, an essential part of maintaining peace in the territory. Ars offered the workers a chance to live in Baruka Village, having cleared land outside the 4-kilometer wall and built plenty of lodgings. He had already prepared work for them to build their lives, mainly in two areas. The first was hardened brick production, as the necessary materials, giant boar tusks or Valkyrie horns, were rare, making these bricks a specialty of Baruka village. The second was cultivating magical mushrooms, where the most important factor was providing ample mana. With proper mana, the mushrooms would yield abundant harvests and could be grown on reusable logs. The workers thanked Ars, and he welcomed them. While he originally wanted to keep the lucrative mushroom business for himself, Ars recognized that sharing the opportunity was better in the long run. As he anticipated possible summons to war in the future, establishing a stable, profitable village would improve his survival chances. This new arrangement sacrificed some of his income, but it also added a specialty product to Baruka. Next, Ars needed to address issues with the farmers, beginning with a land survey. Explaining the survey to Beto, Ars described it as assessing the land, measuring its size, and estimating its crop yield. Beto, not inclined toward mental tasks, opted out. Ars agreed that surveying might not suit Beto. With ground leveling and soil improvement spells, the expected harvest was likely to increase significantly, which meant potentially higher taxes. The land survey's main purpose was to tally the productivity of each field, indirectly informing people about their future tax burdens. However, Ars was wary of raising taxes in his first year of rule. Ars then considered how best to measure land area. Carl suggested using the number of ground leveling spells cast as a measure, which Ars realized could be effective since the ground leveling and soil improvement spells each covered a 10-meter square. This method would allow anyone to make measurements without specialized tools. They decided that in Baruka Knightdom, 1 acre of land would equate to 1 use of the ground leveling spell. Ars remembered how Carl, after their battle with Raymond, had been guilt-ridden, feeling responsible for various mishaps. Since then, Carl had worked hard to be helpful to everyone. Next, Ars decided to establish units of measurement. A meter would be a tenth of one side of the ground leveling area, and a meter would be divided into 100 parts, or centimeters. With length defined, they could also set measurements for volume and weight. A 10x10x10 centimeter cube would represent 1 liter, and 1 liter would weigh 1 kilogram. They'd set the boiling point of water at 100 degrees Celsius. Ars anticipated that people might need time to learn this system, so he planned to distribute a reference table. He sent Carl to inform everyone, knowing Carl could easily recall the information. Thus, Baruka Knightdom adopted a measurement system familiar to Ars. Ars started the land survey with the agreed measurements, but he ran into a problem. He had no paper to document them. Locals around here use sheepskin parchment, but it's cumbersome and not ideal for a task like this. Since they'd be surveying all of Baruka and Linda, Ars needed a more practical and affordable material for recording data. Paper was in short supply and expensive, but he realized the forest around them had trees, albeit unsuited for mushrooms or charcoal production. So Ars decided to try making his own plant-based paper. It took multiple attempts, with Asan watching nearby, skeptical of the process. Ars wasn't discouraged by the early failures. Instead, he adjusted his approach, boiling the mixture at lower temperatures and experimenting with different pastes. He settled on a recipe that used wood from the forest, mana recovery potion to help extract fibers, and pseudo-yams as a glue-like paste. First, Ars whittled and crushed the wood, boiling it with mana potions to extract fibers. Then he mixed the extracted fibers with the paste made from boiled pseudo-yams, strained the mixture through a coarse cloth, and pressed it between layers of cloth to dry. After a few days, he had a thin but sturdy piece of plant paper, surprisingly easy to write on. Not only could Ars now record the land survey data, but Asan, initially doubtful, was impressed and begged Ars to sell him some of the paper. Ars, seeing the potential for both record-keeping and trade, decided to produce more. Its thinness made it convenient, and he was confident it would sell well. This led Ars to the idea of setting up a dedicated production team, prioritizing widows from the region. Papermaking was a way to support these families, offering an alternative to farm work. Though the widows still avoided eye contact with him, one eventually thanked him when they crossed paths, signaling he had managed to ease their burdens in some way. With the paper production underway, Ars turned his attention to equipment for the Valkyries. He realized from a recent encounter with Raymond that saddles and stirrups could enhance stability during battles. His thoughts shifted to creating saddles and stirrups that would make riding easier, even for those less experienced, and give the riders a better foothold. This could pave the way for a cavalry, boosting their military strength significantly. He also noted that horseshoes were essential since the Valkyries' hooves wore down faster in society compared to the wild. Observing the subtle differences in size between those he had raised and the ones hatched by horned Valkyries, Ars figured a single, perfectly sized horseshoe design could be mass-produced with magic. Using hardened brick, he tested various shapes until he found one that suited all terrains, ultimately incorporating it into a spell. In Ars's old life, there were many methods of farming and preserving crops, leaving plenty to eat year-round. But in this world, the only time they can eat their fill is during the harvest season. Even if they grow a ton of crops with soil improvement spells, it will just rot unless they can preserve them somehow. Even Baruka has a storehouse, but they don't do anything with the crops there, so they don't last long. That ends today. Ars creates a new storehouse and stands in front of it with Bido and Gran, announcing that with this new storehouse, they will be able to store crops for a long time. Beto looks at it and says all he sees is a giant tofu-looking building. Ars explains that it's not so simple. It's a special airtight building with walls that are almost 3 times as thick as normal buildings. He opens the door to the storehouse and uses ice lance to start filling it with ice. Seeing him do this, Beto asks in shock if this is really okay. Ars insists they need a lot of ice for this and asks Beto and Gran to help fill it with ice lances. After filling it with ice, Ars says they can now cover the ice in sawdust so it doesn't melt easily. With that, the ice room type freezer is complete. Beto comments that it's very cold, and Gran notes that crops stored inside this ice room won't spoil. Ars mentions he's heard that before electricity, people used ice boxes as freezers. Making an ice box for families to use might also be a good idea. Even if people don't have the necessary magic to use ice, they can just sell them some. This should make food a little more available. Not only can they preserve vegetables, but also the surplus meat that sometimes comes from large hunts. This should improve their situation. Food is the root of Ars's magic. They are now outside the storehouse, and Gran suggests building a castle there. Ars considers this and reflects that he spends most of his days in Baruka, not at Northriver Castle, and points out that a lord without a castle seems odd. However, he finds it easier to work where he is, as the only people at Northriver Castle are Carlos and the minimum number of soldiers specified in the peace treaty. Gran insists that building another castle is essential for displaying power, suggesting that a castle is crucial for a smooth transition to rule. Ars acknowledges Gran's point but feels that constructing another castle might invite trouble, making people think he's getting ahead of himself after dealing with the Raymond problem. Gran counters that while those who were at the battle know Ars's strength, those who weren't may doubt him, and resist paying taxes since he's still just a kid. Ars realizes that he needs a symbol of his power to collect taxes without issues, and he also considers that, since it's meant to be a symbol, it should be more decorated than North River Castle. Gran is excited about the prospect of building the castle, but Ars teases him, saying it seems like he just wants to build another castle. Though it's not urgent, Ars decides to work on the castle gradually while managing other tasks. Currently, North River Castle is the most impressive structure in the Baruka Knightdom. But, as Gran pointed out, the Lord is hardly ever there. By having a grand castle in Baruka, it might also help people understand where to find the Baruka Knightdom. They are opening a free market, but Ars worries whether merchants will actually show up. He realizes he could be sent to battle at any moment, so he can't focus solely on ruling the land. His main priority should be bolstering their forces to increase his chances of survival. To do this, he needs to encourage people to move to the Knightdom. Ars tells Gran that simply building a castle isn't enough. They will create the heartland of the Baruka Knightdom, with that castle at its center. They will make a castle town. Ars had grown so attached to the land within the walls, he cleared himself that he didn't want others to live there. However, he believes that if he makes the city within the walls into a palace, people will want to settle there, and if people move in, merchants will come, turning it into a lively trade city. If people feel protected in their cherished homes, they will rise to fight alongside him, and allowing people to live there brings enormous advantages. The plan is to develop the land between the inner and outer walls. The southern area, where Beto and Gran live and where the merchant has his store, will become the free market area, where they will give permission to open stores. There's still plenty of room left, so Ars will divide the remainder of the southern and western squares into plots of land and sell them to anyone who wants to settle there. He just needs doors and windows, and then they will be ready for people to move into. In the northeast, there's a forest for collecting wood, making it ideal for logging and charcoal making. It will also accommodate paper making and magic mushroom farming. The northwest will primarily be for Hatska Fields, the main food source for Valkyries, but Ars also plans to make part of it an open field. He intends for this area to be for soldier-related activities. Although he's not ready for a standing army yet, making the west gate for army use only should ease the process of marching out when the time comes. For now, he plans to have the peacekeepers, whom he put his father in charge of, move there. He also needs to create a jail to manage the people they arrest and establish a courthouse, so that those who committed lighter crimes can be tried. He ponders whether to judge heavier crimes at the castle himself and leave lighter ones to the elders. All buildings inside the walls will be made of hardened brick, and he will continue to redevelop the land, focusing on city building in the southern quarter. Osan, upon seeing the developed land, remarks that it's amazing and that he has never seen a town like this before. Ars poured himself into developing the city, proudly noting that it even surpassed the splendor of Fontana City. The city layout, with the grid system spreading from the main street through the south and west areas, represented a level of planning rarely seen. The architectural details, arches, glass windows, and the gleaming, hardened brick added a sense of luxury that set it apart. Osan remarked on how valuable these houses would be, impressed by the memory preservation spell Ars used to replicate his own house's details. Ars was confident this would amaze visitors from anywhere. Next, Ars turned to improving the city's external defenses. The original wall was sturdy enough to withstand a boar charge, but it needed upgrades for human threats. Making it all from hardened bricks wasn't feasible, so he retained the existing wall, adding stairs and 200-meter-high towers for better coverage. Following the model used at North River Castle, he put Baito and Vargas in charge of defense atop the wall. Gran also helped, setting up a system where stored hardened bricks could be thrown down on attackers. This resource-efficient tactic would allow them to defend effectively, even with limited weaponry. A moat was also added, wider than at North River, with 4 gates and drawbridges, expertly built by skilled lumberjacks. Later, while standing beside Madoc, Ars observed the completed defenses. Madoc remarked on their ability to raise the drawbridge and withstand a siege if needed, even casting ice lance spells from above. Ars felt immense pride at the birth of Barocania, a true fortress city at the heart of the Baruka Knightum. Demand for glass suddenly spiked, with merchants eager to buy after seeing its use in the city. Although frustrated that glass hadn't sold well earlier, Ars saw the potential and decided to consider mass production. When Gran heard about this plan, however, he cautioned Ars, pointing out that while hardened bricks made sense to mass produce, glass wasn't quite the same. It wasn't just for windows. It had versatile uses, from drinking glasses to plates. Mass producing it might stifle creativity. Inspired by Gran's input, Ars suggested he try making lenses, a new challenge Gran accepted eagerly. Amid these developments, Ars finally took a moment to relax with Hector over tea. They discussed the upcoming plans for the inner walls and the castle interior, intended as symbols of power. Ars admitted he wasn't sure yet what the design should look like. His thoughts were interrupted by an argument between Beto and Vargas over defensive versus offensive strategies. Realizing the importance of balancing both approaches, Ars urged them to talk it out calmly, understanding that both perspectives were essential for the city's security. The scene shifts, and they are sitting at a table. Ars apologizes to Hector for making him brew tea for them. Hector brushes it off, saying he was in the middle of it anyway. Beto summarizes the discussion, stating that in conclusion, they can't really win a battle unless they attack, so they will attack. Vargas counters that they have the power to build castles, so they should focus on defense. Ars thinks about Beto's obsession with attacking, realizing that the battle with the Fontana army was their first experience, and the eerie atmosphere of a battlefield where lives were at stake affected them all. He remembers feeling so tense that he almost screamed, which led him to attack carelessly. He figures Baito must feel similarly, considering they fought against a larger, better-trained enemy. Beto probably thinks their victory came from charging in and believes they should continue fighting that way. It does have a solid track record for them, but while Beto is strong, he's still just a kid and lacks experience. Ars doesn't see their victory as a true success. They didn't do anything other than charge at their opponent. He never wants to charge an enemy again while knowing they are outnumbered and outmatched. Vargas's focus on defense seems strange as well. Vargas argues that they need to concentrate on training to utilize their castle in defensive battles, but from Ars's perspective, a defensive battle is too risky. He knows he's an inexperienced upstart knight, and that he is extremely disliked by the Fontana family's retainers, especially the Raymond faction, who likely see him as a nuisance. Whether they build fortifications or come under siege, no reinforcements will come to help them. Carlos's position is unstable, and he would likely abandon Ars in such situations. They aren't specialized in either type of warfare being proposed. The other knights hate them, and they could be sacrificed at any moment. They have no choice but to survive through their own strength. Each of them needs to excel on the battlefield to make decisions that will keep them and their comrades alive. Everyone must have the power and knowledge of a squad captain. Vargas voices concern that this isn't realistic, but Ars insists that while it may be difficult, they have no choice. After this, the meeting is dismissed. Ars reflects that he can now see what the Baruka army needs, but the problem is how to obtain it. He has dedicated himself to the economy and city planning, but he can't ignore improving their army either. Hector, listening to Ars's mumblings, suddenly asks if Ars wants to conquer land and grow powerful. Ars is taken aback by the interruption, quickly denying it. He only wants to fight for his land and his status here. He admits he is afraid of fighting and doesn't want anyone to die, so peace is best for him. Ars thinks about how his memories of a warless world must heavily influence him. He tells Hector that he just wants a peaceful life of farming and enjoying good food. Hector agrees that sounds good. Yet Ars knows he may not be able to remain a pacifist in a world full of skirmishes between nobles. Ars is in the fields training his soldiers, thinking that their training to become a surviving force on the battlefield has begun. First up is practicing riding the Valkyries. By using saddles and stirrups, the applicants are able to ride the hornless Valkyries. People have to use physical enhancement spells to stay on the horses, resulting in some horrible muscle aches, but it's nothing meditation can't fix. Those who learn to ride can then proceed to the next step. The next step is to learn the scattershot spell while riding the Valkyries. After all, it's very difficult to use a weapon on horseback. They start with the scattershot, which has high accuracy, before moving on to mastering ice lance. Their greatest advantage is their large number of Valkyries, which is why Ars chose this fighting style. He is training magic soldiers who can ride hornless Valkyries and simultaneously hit the targets he designates, allowing them to maintain distance while fighting opponents. He is confident that their concentrated ice lance barrage could even take down a hardened great boar. Their practice against the great boar is going well, with Ars's Valkyrie leading the flock by itself. Even if the riders aren't that good, they can keep formation. With such great leadership, it feels like they're all one big creature. This is how they took their first steps toward forming the Baruka army's magic cavalry. The scene shifts as Gran excitedly tells Ars that he has finally completed it, and urges him to feast his eyes on his creation. Ars notices that Gran looks disheveled, pointing out that he hasn't slept or shaved. Gran brushes it off, claiming he's a proper Baruka who can use the meditation spell, so he feels completely fine. Ars thinks to himself that the meditation spell recovers stamina while sleeping, so if Gran hasn't slept, it shouldn't be working properly. It must have a slight effect even when staying awake, though. Ars holds the device in his hands and suggests trying it out from the top of one of the towers. It turns out to be binoculars capable of zooming into faraway objects by gathering and refracting light through multiple lenses. He admits that he only has a vague understanding of how it works, so he can't replicate it with magic. As he looks through the binoculars, he spots his mom hanging up the laundry and hands the device back to Gran, praising how incredibly well it works. Gran replies that he never makes anything half-baked. Ars reflects on how Gran managed to create such an impressive device from the shabby diagram he provided, realizing that his talent is anything but half-baked as well. He feels grateful once again for Gran coming to Baruka. Ars is sitting in a chair, writing something, when his younger brother tells him it's snowing. Ars responds that it makes sense, it's certainly cold today, and suggests they should get something hot to drink. His younger brother offers to help. As Ars enjoys his tea, he reflects that he doesn't think he'll be able to spend his time so leisurely when the time comes to fight. The year ended without Carlos ever asking him for anything unreasonable. They were summoned a bunch of times, but the Baruka army was never sent into direct battle. This was because they could create fantastic roads leading straight to the rebels' base and easily raise forts with 10-meter walls at strategic points. After seeing the huge number of troops gathering due to the roads and the fortresses growing daily, most of the enemies surrendered. There have been exceptions, of course, but Carlos has been the one to lead the troops to rout them. Thanks to the roads they built, each time they were resummoned, Fontana's infrastructure improved significantly. Ars had also asked Carlos to waive the passage fees for the areas held by the rebels, but it felt like Carlos was thinking that Ars had twisted his arm too many times and was still asking for more. As a result, the cities in Fontana were all doing much better than before. Thanks to that, the Baruka Knightum, lying on the northern edge, had also slowly seen more people and goods coming through. However, both the flow of goods and the summons came to an end with winter. There was a lot of snow in the region, so they spent their time as if they were hibernating off their food stocks. Ars mentions to his Carl that when it gets this cold, he really feels like taking a bath. Carl asks what that is. Ars explains that he wants to warm up by soaking in hot water. Carl agrees that it does seem like it would warm him up. Ars thinks about how this world has purification magic, so it doesn't really click for them. He realizes he has had such a rough time living so far that he hadn't noticed how badly he missed taking a bath. Managing the territory's finances is just so exhausting. One day, Ars was surprised to see his Valkyrie calling to him from the window. When he stepped out, she hinted for him to ride her, and he obliged. The Valkyrie led him to a hot spring, which she had discovered during a previous battle near the river. Ars was thrilled, realizing his Valkyrie remembered his interest in hot springs. After soaking his feet, he thought about how a hot spring inn would surely attract people. Excited, he returned to the village and told Vargas he wanted to use some land in Linda to build an inn. With Vargas's support, Ars began planning, first burying a hardened brick pipe to lead the hot spring water to the village, keeping it warm by burying it underground. Unfortunately, the farmers who helped build the bath ended up creating a huge open pool instead. Ars decided to make the best of it, turning it into a Western-style open-air bath. He even added a valve for water control and a drain that could channel the water to fill Barricania's moat, adding another layer of defense. Over tea with Carl, Ars explained his fascination with hot springs, noting their ability to soothe fatigue. But Carl countered, pointing out that the meditation spell could also relieve exhaustion. Ars found himself fumbling for reasons to justify the hot spring project, wanting Carl to see him as a visionary rather than someone who went through so much trouble just for a bath. Later, standing in a new structure in Linda, Ars proudly unveiled his latest project to Vargas. By channeling the hot spring steam, he created a greenhouse, a concept entirely new to their world. Though he had attempted a greenhouse before, it had failed because glass couldn't trap enough heat. This time, with the hot spring's warmth, it stayed heated even at night. Ars asked Vargas to encourage villagers to try growing crops there, which could greatly improve their food situation during winter. Reflecting on the Valkyrie's role in all of this, Ars was grateful for her loyalty and remarkable abilities. She could endure both the heat of the hot spring and the cold winter without issue, proving herself incredibly resilient. Osan arrived then, reminding Ars it was time to head out, noting that the winter months offered unique opportunities for commerce. With fresh Hatsuka grown in the greenhouse, they could transport the vegetables by sleigh to Fontana City and sell them. Despite its unappealing taste, Hatsuka became a valuable commodity due to the winter scarcity, and Ars was pleased to see how their hard work was paying off. In the harsh winter, when many struggled with food shortages, their greenhouse-grown Hatsuka provided a valuable lifeline. It was common for families to reduce the number of mouths to feed during these times, and fresh produce was a rare luxury. The Hatsuka trade quickly became profitable, with Ars feeling like a winter deliverer, as his deliveries continued all through the season. The first great project of the new year as the Lord of Barricania is to fulfill the New Year's customs of this land. All the knights must greet the Lord who knighted them at the start of the year, and so he has made his way to the castle in Fontana. There, in the Hall of Lords, each of the knights will line up to greet him. Since he is a newcomer, he will have to steel himself and wait, as he will be the last one. Next comes the standing dinner party in the Hall of Feasts. Other knights at the feast are talking about him, saying that he is the rumored farmer knight and that he is really just a kid. They express disbelief that Raymond lost to him, mentioning that the bastard went around selling stuff in winter. Plenty of other knights had proved their worth. So why would the Lord let such a vulgar kid have land? Ars reflects that becoming a knight is supposedly only related to achievements on the battlefield, not family, but in reality, compared to the farmers who struggle for food and don't have proper weapons, the vast majority of knights come from knight families. Simply put, the people here are mostly highly privileged individuals from the upper class, not farmers or commoners. He stands out like a sore thumb. Although he is the only one here who was knighted by Carlos himself, there isn't a single person willing to keep him company. Aren't they all fellow knights? Other knights keep whispering about him, saying they saw him using another type of magic from the Fontana family, and that he built an enchantment in the blink of an eye when they were mobilized. They speculate that he definitely has ties to some other noble and that they need to advise the Lord about it. Ars thinks that despite what they say, nobody has tried anything with him yet, probably because of his achievements. But they must be the Raymond faction. They look like a pain to deal with, so he decides to pretend he doesn't notice them. Bored, he takes a peek and can easily tell the difference. The ones who look battle-hardened have much better quality mana, even if they don't have much. They must have been unconsciously refining their mana from their battlefield experience. On the other hand, the ones who collided with Raymond and formed mana paths with him have neither quality nor quantity to speak of. He thinks he should tell Beto to add mana training to the menu. Ars gazes at a girl thinking, what's with her? She doesn't look like she's been in battle, but her mana quality is the best he's ever seen. Even more intriguing, her mana distribution is uneven. Unlike the knights, whose mana covers their entire body, hers is concentrated elsewhere. Ars calls her from behind, catching her off guard. She's startled, but politely offers to help with anything he needs. Ars wonders if she's unconsciously doing something unique with her mana, or if she's undergone special training, as her mana is all centered around her head. He asks excitedly for her name, where she lives, and a bit about her, which startles her even more. She hesitantly asks him to give her some space, and Ars tries to explain, knowing it might sound strange, but assures her it's nothing to worry about. Carlos approaches, commenting with a smirk about Ars boldly soliciting a woman on the first day of the year. Carlos jokes that great men have great desires, teasing Ars for hitting on the woman serving tables before coming to see him. The hall's attention shifts to Ars, and whispers start up around him. Ars tries to clarify, insisting he only spoke to her out of interest in something unusual about her, not because she's a woman. Carlos just laughs, saying that doesn't change the fact that Lilina was on Ars's mind. He instructs Lilina to take Ars to a private room and keep him company. Flustered, Lilina protests, but Carlos, playfully insisting, tells her that she spends too much time reading and could use this opportunity to entertain a guest. Ars, realizing he's put her in an awkward position, feels a bit guilty. In Lilina's room, Ars sits while she serves him tea. He invites her to join him, then asks how she knows Lord Carlos. Lilina explains that she and Carlos are related by blood. Surprised, Ars asks if they're siblings, noting how they seem almost like strangers. Lilina clarifies that Carlos was born to the Lord's wife, while she was born to one of the maids. Ars realizes they're half-siblings. Their hair color is exactly the same, yet, unlike Carlos, she doesn't exude ambition or aggression. Lilina seems quiet and reserved, and while Carlos is fairly good-looking, Lilina's beauty feels almost otherworldly, like a piece of art. Ars asks why, as the Lord's sister, she was waiting tables. Lilina explains that it's customary for noble or knight family women to entertain guests, usually starting from a young age to learn proper manners. However, she spent her whole life reading in her room, so this was actually her first time. Embarrassed about her lack of experience at 16, she quickly changes the subject, asking what he wanted to discuss. Ars explains he was observing the mana of the people in the hall, and her concentrated mana on her head caught his attention. He wonders if someone taught her this. Lilina responds that no one taught her, and she's never even heard of mana being located in different parts of the body. Ars ponders this, understanding that concentrating mana in a specific part of the body can greatly enhance that area's capabilities. Beto, for instance, strengthens his entire body by spreading mana evenly, while Vargas focuses his mana on his skin for stronger defense. Concentrating it on the head would boost memory, judgment, and processing speed, similar to memory preservation techniques. It seems Lilina has been doing this unconsciously, and her mana quality surpasses even the knights in the Hall of Feasts. Her talent, along with reading every day, might be factors. It's like how Ars's mana improves from farming. Curious, he asks what kinds of books she reads. Lilina says that because books are expensive, most of her collection covers dense topics like history, and it takes her a while to fully understand even one book. Ars acknowledges that parchment alone is costly, so books would naturally be valuable. He recalls how the letters Asen writes to nobles are filled with elaborate and drawn-out compliments. Although Ars can read, he would struggle with classic texts without a dictionary. They'd feel almost like nonsense. He then Lilina if she could relay what one of her history books says in a way he'd find easier to understand. Lilina, somewhat surprised, considers it, and Ars prompts her with a question, asking about the decline of the royal family that once united all the nobility. Ars asks Lilina about the decline of the royal family, and she agrees to explain. She begins with the geography of their land, describing the natural barriers that isolated their country from invaders: towering mountains, vast forests, ravines, and swamps. Due to this isolation, a period of peace prevailed until a wizard united the land, establishing the royal family. This founder was unparalleled in magical ability and used a naming ceremony through the church to bind other wizards to him. By drawing mana from all the wizards under him, he gained enormous power, which he passed down to his descendants. This was the origin of the royal family, with nobles drawn from the wizards' families who supported the king. However, Lilina explains that over generations, a tyrant named King Nero emerged. He lacked magical abilities and relied solely on the mana granted through his position. When some nobles rebelled, Nero ruthlessly ordered their deaths, but this act only weakened him, as he depended on the mana they provided. Ars interrupts, noting that being at the end of the mana paths, Nero must have lost a tremendous amount of power in the purges. Lilina continues, confirming that Nero lost access to the Grand Spell, an ancient magic supposedly capable of destroying entire towns. Without the mana to activate this spell, Nero's hold over the nobles crumbled, as they no longer feared his power. He attempted to mend relations, but most nobles refused to let him name them, reducing his power to that of any noble. This marked the end of the royal family's dominance and the beginning of ongoing skirmishes among nobles. Ars, fascinated, thanks Lilina, realizing the careful balance of power tied to mana. Lilina adds that the church also played a role, as it banned offensive spells, which prevented it from taking the royal family's place. Ars chuckles when he reads Nero's nickname in the history book, surprised to find such blunt language. Lilina guesses that historians added it for dramatic effect, like a fairy tale ending. Ars thinks to himself that she truly loves her books. Suddenly, a knock sounds at the door, and Lilina's younger brother, Lion, enters. Lilina introduces Ars to Lion, who's heard of Ars's reputation. When Ars questions the family connection, Lilina explains that she and Lion share a mother, but Lion's father is her mother's current husband, while she is Lord Carlos's half-sister. Ars muses that it's quite a complicated family situation. Lion teases Lilina, noting he's never seen her talking so freely with a man before. Embarrassed, Lilina blushes and scolds Lion, who continues to tease her. Ars watches them with amusement, thinking they seem to get along well. Lion tells Ars he was worried Lilina might be uncomfortable but is relieved to see how animated she is. Before leaving, Lion asks Ars to continue taking good care of his sister, and Ars agrees, grateful for the fascinating history lessons she provides. The scene opens with Carlos informing Ars about his upcoming marriage, suggesting spring as the season for the ceremony. Ars is stunned, shocked by the sudden arrangement. Carlos explains that Lion has already given his consent, entrusting Lilina to Ars's care. Reflecting on Lion's recent words, Ars realizes that what seemed like a casual comment was actually a significant declaration. He also recalls Lilina's hesitant attempts to bring up the subject, only now understanding that he was the only one unaware of the situation. When Ars protests due to his young age, Carlos dismisses his concern, noting that 10 is a typical age for noble marriages. Ars, bewildered, finds the expectations of noble society extreme. Carlos continues, explaining that the marriage would benefit Ars's social standing by linking him directly to Carlos. Ars realizes this is a strategic alliance, a political marriage designed to secure his position within noble society. Curious about Lilina's family, Ars learns that her parents have passed, and even if they were alive, Carlos wouldn't entertain any objections. Lilina, as Carlos reveals, has long understood that her life would likely follow this path, as nobles often serve as bargaining tools. Carlos adds that many have proposed to Lilina, including suitors who might limit her freedom to pursue her love of reading. This, he explains, is why Lion entrusted her to Ars. Carlos urges Ars to make a quick decision. Later, Ars rides his Valkyrie, mulling over Carlos's words. He suspects that Carlos's seemingly forceful attitude belies genuine concern for Lilina's well-being. Ars feels blindsided by how quickly everything has happened, even wondering if he was intentionally led into the situation. Memories of past conversations with Lilina surface, when she expressed her enjoyment of sharing her love for books with him, a rare experience for her. In the present, Ars realizes he must find a way to share the news of his impending marriage with those around him. Ars shares the news of his engagement to Lilina with his family, stirring mixed reactions. Baito, his brother, reacts with mock outrage, grumbling that Ars is getting married first and even to a princess. Ars reminds him that Baito's dream was to marry a princess he saved as a hero. Though frustrated, Baito declares his own ambitions, to become stronger, accomplish amazing feats, and marry an incredibly beautiful lady, promising to prove himself. Ars, amused, wishes him luck, though noting it isn't something to compete over. Hector and Carl offer their congratulations, while their mother expresses a bit of sadness at her youngest son's early marriage. Hector recalls that Ars never seemed interested in marriage, often preferring his own company since childhood. Ars explains that, while he's still only 10 and not particularly interested in marriage, it seems a beneficial arrangement for Barricania. Lilina is kind, and the marriage will bring advantages to their territory, like advancing the castle construction Gran had been so eager about. Beto jokes about Ars's habit of building castles without permission, suggesting he could build one here too. But Ars points out the need to be more considerate this time. The plan is to make the new Barricania castle lavish but not overly extravagant, out of respect for Lord Carlos. During the marriage talks, Ars had quickly resolved any concerns by promising to create a grand home worthy of Lilina Fontana, and this endorsement now allows them to build the castle with some extra flair. Ars starts contemplating what makes a building project convey authority and prestige. Building a tall castle might be impressive but would become a nightmare to maintain, even with the help of purification spells. With only himself and his housekeeper living there, he decides against building a massive structure. Instead, he wants something that looks imposing yet sacred, something that radiates respect. Recalling images of gods and divine figures from his past life, Ars wonders if incorporating elements like light could help give the new castle a sense of divine majesty. The scene shifts to Ars, sitting on a chair with Gran standing before him. Gran listens as Ars shares an idea for the new castle, suggesting they use glass to make it both impressive and imposing. Ars points out that the unique glass used in town has already garnered many requests, and incorporating it into the castle design would set it apart from anything else. Gran raises a practical concern, noting that glass typically serves as windows, and a castle full of ordinary windows might look odd. Ars clarifies that he's envisioning stained glass, not the standard kind, which piques Gran's interest. Ars explains that visitors to Barricania would enter the castle for audiences and see him illuminated through a large stained glass window, creating a halo effect behind him. The colorful light would not only leave a striking impression, but also reinforce his authority. Ars then sketches a design for the castle, which starts to resemble a cathedral more than a traditional fortress. To unify the look, he decides to color it all in shades of blue, the color symbolizing mana, to create an atmosphere of reverence and strength. Ars is sitting in his office when Gran enters, holding a stack of papers. He lays them on Ars's table, explaining that he has produced blueprints based on Ars's drawings. Asan, curious about what's going on, enters the room to take a look as well. Ars points out that since the appearance of the building can change drastically depending on the angle of sunlight, the orientation needs to be carefully considered during construction. Osan observes the blueprints and remarks that they look very different from the original drawings. Gran is impressed with the progress, noting that the glass will make the structure quite vulnerable to attacks. Ars suggests that they rely on the inner and outer walls for defense, and proposes adding a secret passage for emergencies, which Gran agrees is an excellent idea. Ars begins thinking about the various sections the castle will need: his own quarters, living spaces for the staff, a meeting room, a reception area for important guests, and an audience hall with a large stained glass window. He's already prepared hardened bricks for the castle, having assigned the task to the citizens during the winter months when they couldn't farm. Gran will handle most of the construction, while Ars takes charge of the stained glass. Before diving into the full-sized stained glass, Ars decides to experiment with a model-sized version. He creates a sculpture of the hall with the glass installed. Satisfied, he remarks that it looks perfect. Carl, impressed with the miniature version, praises Ars for how realistic it looks despite its small size. Ars muses that it might even sell well as a children's toy, or attract interest from nobles who appreciate art. Carl wonders if Ars plans to build a full-sized version, and Ars replies that Gran will handle the main construction, and then he'll add the stained glass. Carl suggests that Ars could have made the whole thing with magic, just as he did with the model. Ars realizes he could have, and thanks Carl for the reminder. He now sees that the project could be completed much sooner than planned. Carl, watching his brother, thinks that sometimes Ars misses the most obvious solutions. The scene shifts to Ars welcoming Lion to Baruka Castle. Ars remarks that the Baruka Knightdom, initially just a small territory with 2 villages, needed at least a castle to properly welcome a princess, sharing with Lion the joy he and Gran felt after completing it. Lion, however, points out that his older sister, while related by blood to Lord Carlos, is officially part of the Graham family, which is subordinate to the Fontana family, making her far from a princess in status. Ars recalls that Lord Carlos had mentioned Raymond's role in the fall of the Graham family. Lion confirms, explaining that the Graham family once held a knightdom and had served the Fontana family for generations, but his father's position as Raymond's political enemy led to their territory being confiscated after his father's death. Ars wonders if Raymond had a hand in Lion's father's death and asks if Lion has considered petitioning Lord Carlos for the return of his family's territory. Lion explains that, though he appreciates Ars's thoughtfulness, it's been years since his father's passing. Their former territory is now divided among multiple knight houses, making it difficult for Lord Carlos to reassign it. Lion, choosing to focus on the present, requests to serve under Ars. His ultimate goal is to revive the Graham family, and he sees battlefield achievements as crucial for that. Despite his lack of battle experience, he assures Ars that he learned command and tactics from his father, and is confident he can be of use. Understanding Lion's intentions, Ars recognizes that Lion aims to achieve victories for him through tactical command during battles summoned by Carlos, thereby earning recognition without needing his own troops. Ars agrees, appointing Lion to work by his side and also to assist in regular work beyond the battlefield. Ars inquires if Lion is still in contact with people from the former Graham territory, hoping they might join Baruka, especially anyone experienced in territory management. Lion is taken aback, feeling honored to be trusted with such responsibilities. Ars reassures him, saying they'll be brothers soon enough, and as the older brother, it's his duty to help. Just then, Ars and Lion are startled by a nearby conversation. A lady criticizes the castle's grandiose style, doubting the sanity behind it. Gran, slightly offended, retorts, but she dismisses him, attributing her dislike to it being the work of someone as unremarkable as him. Ars observes her curiously, wondering who she is, while Lion gently reminds her to show respect in front of Lord Ars. The lady's name is Clarice. Clarice addresses Ars and Lion with a respectful apology, introducing herself as Lilina's personal attendant, here to help oversee the wedding preparations. She mentions a disagreement with Gran, explaining that she had suggested modifying the overly elaborate interior to make it more fitting. Ars is surprised, pointing out that Gran's craftsmanship was excellent and that the decorations were made at his own request. Gran, proud of his work, is quick to agree, emphasizing that the pieces are all handcrafted masterpieces. Clarice acknowledges this but points out that the abundance of elaborate decorations may come across as excessive, risking the appearance of Ars flaunting his newfound status. Ars realizes that Clarice is subtly suggesting that the decor might make his recent rise to power too obvious. Clarice, sensing his understanding, expresses her frustration that Gran hadn't understood her intentions, accusing him of disregarding the aesthetic values of noble society. She warns that this oversight could make Ars a target of ridicule among nobles. Gran, although not bothered by others' opinions, feels differently when it concerns Ars and admits he wouldn't want Ars to be insulted because of his work. Ars reflects on their conversation, realizing that his and Gran's focus on functionality had limited their sense of noble aesthetics. Clarice, with a knowing smile, offers to take over the castle's interior decoration, guaranteeing that not only will the wedding be a grand event, but Ars and Lilina's life together will be enriched in a beautifully adorned space. Ars concedes, aware that the castle he and Gran had built will now be decorated according to Clarice's vision. He recalls his promise to find work for members of the Graham family, starting with Lion, but notes that it seems Clarice has taken the lead in making her mark first. Ars sits in his office with Clarice, Lion, and Gran, discussing the castle's furnishing plans. Clarice proposes inviting renowned craftsmen, Almari and Barbara, to create furniture that complements the impressive stained glass centerpiece of the castle. Ars notes the short time frame before the wedding ceremony, making it impossible to commission custom pieces in time. Gran offers to create new pieces himself, but Clarice insists on masterful craftsmanship, dismissing Gran's suggestion. Ars considers an alternative, purchasing pre-existing works by famous artisans. Clarice, however, feels the castle's unique design makes it unlikely they'll find matching pieces without first trying them out. Ars suggests hosting an event in Barricania where merchants would be invited to present potential decorations, positioning it as a quality check to gauge merchants' discernment. Merchants with goods that meet their standards would receive a certificate, adding prestige to their business. Clarice acknowledges the idea's appeal, but remains concerned about merchants' ability to match their pieces to the distinct castle interior without prior knowledge of its design. Thinking ahead, Ars recalls the small-scale model he made of the audience hall, which gives a sense of the space's look and feel. He proposes sharing this model with the merchants to guide their selections. Clarice is delighted, requesting a copy for Lilina as well. Lion advises caution, as showing the castle's structure could compromise its security, suggesting that only limited models be provided temporarily and returned later. Ars agrees, planning to create a few models for Osan to distribute selectively among trusted merchants, while Clarice oversees the selection of pieces that fit best. Gran, wanting to ensure practicality in Clarice's choices, insists on participating in the judging process as well. With the plans set, Ars reflects on the challenge of mediating between Clarice's and Gran's strong opinions. He hopes the event will yield quality furnishings, and the merchant quality check is officially underway. At the event, Ars is taken aback by the impressive turnout, with merchants crowding in far greater numbers than anticipated. Osan explains that merchants came from all over, even beyond Fontana, each claiming their taste to be the finest. The intricate model of Baruka Castle was a key attraction. Not only is such detailed craftsmanship uncommon, but the stained glass in the audience hall had captivated imaginations, driving merchants to bring their best. Many merchants believed that a knight capable of crafting both exquisite models and an actual castle must offer substantial rewards, and the added allure of earning the Graham family's stamp of approval turned the event into a festival-like gathering for them. Reflecting on the situation, Ars realizes the model's impact. Initially, he'd thought of it as nothing more than a dollhouse, but now he sees Carl and Clarice were right. It's been a huge draw and exceeded his expectations. Ars, Clarice, and Gran sit in a room, reviewing the furniture brought by merchants. Gran, impressed by the craftsmanship of a mechanical doll, voices his admiration, but Clarice quickly rejects it, sparking a debate. Gran questions allowing any defective items into their castle, while Clarice insists it could be restored to perfection with minor repairs. Through the combined efforts of Gran and Clarice, Baruka Castle steadily moves toward completion, with every detail enhanced. They make changes to the reception area, and Ars notes that the space feels far more welcoming and comfortable now. However, he also realizes that nearly all the money he had saved has been spent on these improvements. With the ceremony approaching, Ars resolves to refocus on earning money once everything settles down. Ars is in his office when Asan enters, bringing Maddock along to report that the merchant quality check event has finally concluded. Ars expresses his gratitude, acknowledging that thanks to Maddock, they avoided dealing with troublesome merchants. Maddock remarks on the effort involved. Reflecting on the event's standards, Ars recalls that merchants were judged on 3 conditions: quality, aesthetics, and integrity. Those meeting all criteria earned a 3-star rating. Maddock's role as a judge focused particularly on the 3rd condition, helping to identify any merchants involved in misconduct, which significantly raised the quality of goods traded in the Free City. Ars suggests to Asan and Maddock that they continue holding these quality checks regularly to maintain high standards. He realizes that while Barucania's remote location initially seemed like a disadvantage, this event has shown the importance of having trade guilds to ensure merchant quality. Just as Baruka Castle's interior improved, so too did the goods and people drawn to the Baruka knightdom, marking a notable transformation. On a warm spring day that revived the land, Lilina and Ars held their wedding ceremony, surrounded by cheers and illuminated by the beautiful light filtering through the stained glass windows. The festivities lasted for 3 days. Ars asks Lilina if wedding ceremonies are always so intense, and she notes that most couples stop receiving guests after a day or 2, but it seems he is especially popular. Reflecting on the crowd, Ars realizes that the line of people waiting to congratulate them included not only familiar faces, but also merchants from the quality check, recent visitors to the hot springs, and others, some even strangers. Many commoners and farmers were drawn to the event, especially for the opportunity to enjoy high-class food from the Graham family cooks, which they wouldn't normally experience. Here, tradition dictates that everyone attending, noble or commoner, is treated to a meal. Bishop Paolo joins them, expressing his joy at officiating the ceremony and noting that travel across Fontana is much easier thanks to the roads Ars built. He calls it the most divine ceremony he's ever led, admiring the stained glass in the castle. However, Paolo sternly points out that there's not a single church in the castle town. Ars, who realizes he forgot about the church, tries to explain, mentioning that the church in Baruka village should be enough for now. Paolo retorts that he cannot neglect the spiritual needs of the town's residents. Ars assures him there is land set aside for a new church in the southeastern area. Paolo is pleased and prays for their happiness. He is about to leave but remembers something and says that churches in larger cities often have orphanages. He urges Ars to include one when building the church, rounding out the vision for their growing town. Following Bishop Paolo's request, Ars decides to build a church with an orphanage in the castle town. A nun expresses her pleasure at the news, mentioning she recently became a bishop herself, and that managing the new church will be her responsibility. Paolo assigns her this duty, adding that she has experience from helping him run the church in Baruka. Ars offers to connect the church and orphanage using leftover materials from the castle, which the nun gratefully appreciates. Paolo blesses Ars, then leaves with the nun. Ars, relieved that Paolo has truly left this time, listens as Lilina comments on Paolo's straightforwardness. She finds his frankness valuable, noting that his willingness to point out Ars's shortcomings could be helpful in times of need. Ars, however, feels wary of Paolo's keen awareness of his weaknesses and wonders if the bishop is fully aware of his financial situation, especially since Paolo arranged funding for the church. Musing about the orphanage, Ars decides to add a vocational school. He recognizes a need for educated personnel, especially as Baruka knightdom grows and wealthier people and merchants begin settling in the city. Ars shares with Lilina that an urban legend claims anyone who comes to Barucania will receive the Baruka surname. However, he hesitates to grant the surname to new arrivals, mindful of his recent peace with the Fontana family and the church's leniency with his use of the naming spell. If left unchecked, he fears that those who can't find stable work will settle outside the city walls, creating a slum. Determined to address this, he decides to open a school for reading, writing, and math, alongside a vocational school to teach crafts, ensuring people can find reliable work. Realizing he's been lost in thought, Ars apologizes to Lilina, who reassures him. She feels he's a good lord because of his dedication to the territory. She praises the improvements he's made, including the road from Fontana City, North River Castle, and the joyful expressions of townspeople who greeted them. Lilina, reflecting on the hardship and conflict in their world, is moved by the peaceful environment Ars has built. She shares that, while nobles have limited freedom and are often used in political schemes, she wants to protect the happiness Ars has created. She expresses her desire to stay by his side for the rest of their lives, sharing in the wonderful future he is building. Ars stands outside the church thinking about marriage. Personally, he feels it might have been too soon for him, but it's not half bad. Thank goodness it was Lilina he met. Carl arrives behind him, apologizing for being late, and is amazed to see that everything is finished. The church, orphanage, school, and vocational school are all completed. Ars mentions that while it's a bit far from the center, there is plenty of space. He then asks Carl to become a teacher at the school, which surprises him. Ars explains that he needs many things to properly run the bureaucracy of Baruka Knightum, and one of them is increasing the literacy rate. The people of Linda and Baruka were originally poor farmers, so almost none of them could read or write. Having to rely on memory for everything, from reports to teaching, is inefficient and prone to mistakes. Ars planned to teach them reading and writing using memory preservation magic, but their handwriting and organizational skills are so poor that even if they learn words, it's still hard to read. He wonders if they would even be able to do arithmetic with just numbers, which is where the school comes in. He plans to have merchants teach literature and math when they are in town, while chiefs and knowledgeable elders will teach the children daily wisdom and local history. At the end of each school day, the students will be treated to an all-you-can-eat lunch, which he hopes will draw more people in. Ars also asks Carl to teach the students how to focus mana on their heads, as it will help their minds work better and speed up their learning. Carl has been practicing mana control on his head since he was young, and Ars believes his ability to teach will make a difference. Carl, still feeling guilty for his lack of involvement during the battle with the nobles, is determined to do his best. He agrees to teach and help the students with their mana control, and Ars even gives him the important duty of checking the lunch after class. Ars reflects on how responsible and hardworking Carl is, despite being only 7 years old. He knows that if Carl teaches mana control, everyone will quickly pick it up. However, there's still the problem of finding a head teacher for the vocational school, Gran. Gran tells the students they can work without sleep for weeks and shouldn't worry if they collapse because he'll wake them up. Ars, slightly frustrated, reminds Gran to do a decent job as a teacher. Ars has a lot of things he needs Craftsman for, especially since the stained glass is now famous. He would like to find craftsmen who can work with glass, but what he needs most at the moment is someone who can make lenses. He wishes Gran would simply make whatever he's asked, as Gran is an incredibly innovative person, but he rarely produces much. When Ars asked Gran to make more binoculars, Gran complained that making the same thing repeatedly was boring, and that it was more suited for someone like Ars. Gran is a useful worker, but a somewhat unreliable one. What Ars really needs is more people who can make copies of Gran's work, even if they're inferior. He just hopes that the craftsman will manage to learn Gran's techniques and settle down to work in Baruka. Ars is riding Valkyrie, observing the fields. He notes that it will soon be time to harvest the wheat. Vargas, sitting on a tree trunk with a disappointed look, agrees, but adds that the harvest this year is going to be overwhelming. He mentions that he passes through the wheat field every day on his way to and from the training area, and that the harvest will be too much. Ars, thinking it's a good thing, asks why Vargas seems upset. Vargas explains that he really hates threshing. He describes the process, putting the wheat in a bag, beating it to get the grain off the ear, letting the grain fall a distance, and using wind to blow away the lighter parts, leaving only the heavier grain. He finds it tedious and time-consuming and gets depressed just thinking about threshing the entire field. Ars, understanding his frustration, pats him on the shoulder and says he gets it too. Thanks to Ars's ground leveling and soil improvement spells, the harvest this year is much larger than usual. He also reflects on how the farming techniques here haven't progressed much, largely due to the long civil war and the repeated loss of the workforce. Ars admits that he finds threshing a pain as well and shows Vargas a thresher he made when he was a kid. Though it's not very durable, because the teeth are made of wood, he points out that it's still a start. Vargas suggests making it out of hardened bricks, and while Ars isn't sure if that will work, he wants to make something better. He has an idea to make one that can be rotated by stepping on a pedal, which Vargas agrees would be very helpful. Ars decides to tell Gran the idea and have him make it. Gran won't make more than one, so Ars plans to have the vocational school students take notes while he does. When the thresher is ready, Vargas tries it and is amazed by how efficient it is. He remarks that threshing will be finished in no time now, and Ars plans to have a few of them made and given out. Ars, feeling accomplished with the thresher, says that there's one more thing he wants to make. Vargas, curious, asks if Ars has another great tool in mind. Ars responds affirmatively, mentioning it's just an idea for now, and Vargas, intrigued, expresses his curiosity. Ars thinks to himself that people consider him a bit of a weirdo, but that's okay. He's surrounded by people who trust him and let him pursue his ideas. Most importantly, he has a family and wants to create a place where they can live every day without worry. Afterward, Ars heads home, riding Valkyrie, where Lilina is waiting for him. He tells her that they will do their best as a lord tomorrow as well. The scene shifts and Carlos, wearing his armor with a serious expression, orders his subordinate to report any change, no matter how small. He then commands to send orders to all nobles, stating that they are reconquering Einard Hill, and it's time to end this old feud. The subordinate acknowledges the orders. The scene shifts, and Ars reflects on how rough it was, but they managed to transform the thresher into a pedal-powered threshing machine. While working on that, Ars wanted to improve the querns, which were currently powered only by human strength, or at least that was the plan. Lying on the ground, tired, Ars wonders how to turn the sails. Gran had drawn a basic mock-up, but Ars is unsure how to make it work. Carl arrives, noticing Ars on the floor, and asks about his work. Ars asks how being a teacher is going, and Carl responds that everyone is a quick learner, which Ars thinks must be due to Carl's teaching skills. Ars then explains his idea to build a windmill with sturdy sails that uses wind to turn the sails, transferring the force through axles and cogwheels to grind the querns. Since there's no river in Barricania like at North Reaver Castle, the windmill is the next best option. However, Ars is troubled by the fact that the wind doesn't always blow the right way, and he wants to figure out how to turn the sails. Carl suggests that Ars doesn't really need that function, and proposes building 4 windmills facing each of the cardinal directions, so at least one will be functioning at all times. Ars realizes he doesn't need to perfectly replicate every piece of technology from his old world, and with Carl's help, the plan is set. They build 4 windmills in the northwest area where the wheat fields are, and thanks to the magic-enhanced harvest, they are now able to thresh and grind the wheat smoothly. As Ars reflects on how much less intimidating the wheat fields will feel next year, a man arrives, urgently requesting Ars's presence for a manners lesson with Clarice, as Carl has been waiting since before the lesson was supposed to start. Ars is about to leave but is stopped by Beto, who arrives on a Valkyrie, announcing that an envoy from Fontana is waiting. Ars realizes that this summons is different from the previous ones, which only required him to be gone for about a month. Standing on a castle wall, Ars thinks about Einard Hill, the land to the east, and how it will take a month to get there. With the fighting and the trip back, they may not return before winter. Thanks to the Peacemaker members staying behind, they'll manage. However, most of the army will go, and Ars can't leave everything to the Graham family's people, so he decides to leave Baruka Knightdom in Carl's hands. Carl, standing on the castle wall, reflects on how everything Ars had asked him to take care of so far was a way for his brother to look after him. But now, this was different. Hector approaches, noticing Carl lost in thought, and asks if he's okay. Carl assures him he's fine and thinks to himself that this is his chance to repay Ars. Hector advises Carl not to overwork himself, and Carl promises he won't. The scene shifts to Ars and his father riding Valkyries among the soldiers, preparing for the battle ahead. Ars' father remarks that heading to Einard Hill likely means they are once again facing the Uruk family. Ars is curious and asks if his father has fought the Uruks before. His father explains that it was a long time ago when Ars was just a little kid. He recalls how, back then, Ars had been running around, obsessed with earning money, not even having a name for himself yet. His father shares that he was only a common foot soldier during that time, never engaging in direct combat with any knights. However, even from a distance, he could see the incredible power of the Uruk family's magic, which was completely different from the ice magic used by the Fontana family. Ars is fascinated, eager to learn more. His father tells him that the Uruk family doesn't use fire magic as Ars initially thought, but instead practices a unique form of beastification. This magic allows the Uruk family to transform into fox-like creatures. While several noble families can use magic to turn into beasts, the Uruks specifically transform into foxes, gaining fox ears and tails rather than turning into full foxes. His father further explains that after the transformation, the knights gain immense strength and speed, and their magic, known as hazy fire, allows them to produce flames, though this is not the most dangerous aspect. Ars reflects on how different this magic is from his own earth magic, and the ice magic of the Fontana family, and wonders if there are other kinds of magic out there that he has yet to discover. As the conversation continues, Baito interrupts, curious about the physical transformation the Uruks undergo. Lion, who has knowledge of the Uruk family's magic, explains that the transformation is not a complete change into foxes, but instead, their bodies take on fox-like characteristics. They grow fox ears and tails, but retain their humanoid form. Ars, excited by the idea of seeing Chemomimi, human-fox hybrids, asks if it's true. Lion confirms it, though he's confused by Ars's strange excitement. Ars, thrilled by the prospect of seeing a girl like Lilina with animal ears, expresses how amazing it would be to encounter such creatures. Baito, not understanding Ars' enthusiasm, reminds him that they're heading into what could be a massive battle, but Ars is unfazed, still distracted by the idea of Chemomimi. The group finally arrives in Fontana just before dawn, thanks to the new roads they've built. The fortress, built with tribute bricks, is now complete, and they bring with them more soldiers than ever before. As they arrive, some of the soldiers begin bad-mouthing Ars, commenting on his less-than-stellar reputation. Ars sighs, acknowledging that his favorability among the troops is still low. Ars's father, ever practical, asks him to build a stable for the horses, allowing him to take care of the other logistical matters, while Ars goes to greet Lord Carlos. Ars thanks his father and heads off to do as asked. Ars reflects on the long-standing conflict between the Uruk family to the east and the Fontana family to the west, with Einard Hill being the primary battleground between them. The land is incredibly important due to its defensible position. It is the only piece of land in the area that can be easily defended. Thus, controlling Einard Hill is seen as essential for controlling the land of the other family. Recently, however, the Uruk family has had a string of victories and has been able to occupy Einard Hill. This has caused frustration for the Fontana family, who have long fought to protect the land. Carlos stands before his knights, giving an impassioned speech about reclaiming Einard Hill, which he asserts is rightfully his domain. He emphasizes that the Uruks are unjustly occupying the land that is essential for southbound traffic, and he calls on justice to be served. Ars, however, knows that the Uruks have been able to hold the land not only because of their military victories, but also because of the internal turmoil within the Fontana family. After Ars killed Raymond, the representative who controlled the Fontana family, the Uruks saw an opportunity to take more land. In the wake of Raymond's death, the Uruk family figured the Fontana family was weak and divided, so they sought to expand their territory. At the same time, Ars's father, Carlos, took swift and decisive action, seizing power quickly and taming the ringleader of Baruka, who had been responsible for Raymond's death. He even betrothed a member of the Graham family, who had opposed Raymond. The marriage solidified his position and united the family. The Uruk family, unsure of what had transpired, decided to wait and see how things would play out. Thanks to Carlos's leadership, the Uruks did not launch a full-scale invasion, but smaller territories around Einard Hill were lost. Ars is uneasy about the invasion, preferring not to be on the attacking side of a war. However, he knows that for the sake of peace and stability, Baruka must fulfill its duty. Despite the inevitable conflict ahead, Ars is resigned to the fact that it is part of the process. After all, their usual work will continue, building roads and preparing for what lies ahead. Although Ars would rather not be involved in the war, he understands that maintaining peace and fulfilling their duties is crucial for the future of Baruka. Ars and Beto are on the watchtower, each in their usual positions. Beto sits cross-legged on the roof, while Ars stands surveying the area. Beto, a bit restless, reflects that he thought it was finally time for them to engage in battle, only to find themselves assigned to road building instead. Ars reassures him that building roads is more crucial than it seems. He explains that Einard Hill has been transformed by the Uruk into a fortified stronghold, serving as their central base. To have any chance of reclaiming the hill, they first need to establish their own base and reclaim the surrounding villages, weakening the Uruk's control bit by bit. Ars admits he's relieved to be working on this groundwork rather than launching a direct attack on the fort. Beto, however, is impatient, his spirit burning to fight and prove their strength. Ars understands but cautions Beto against rallying the soldiers on his own. He notes to himself that Beto, with his fierce energy, would probably struggle to fit into a more peaceful society. Switching his focus back to their task, Ars puts binoculars to his eyes, scanning the landscape to check on the work. Suddenly, he catches something unusual, a hazy movement in the forest. Concerned, he lowers the binoculars. Beto, sensing Ars's unease, asks what's wrong. Concentrating mana into his vision, Ars spots an unusual gathering of mana, a dense concentration moving within the forest. Alarmed, he realizes they're under attack, a significant force heading their way. They both scramble off the tower, urgency overtaking them. Ars notes that if they don't act quickly, the workers on the roads could be in serious danger. Beto points out that they're not in a position to mobilize immediately, but Ars, assessing the situation, suspects that the enemy soldiers are riding magic beasts. Based on the mana concentration, there must be hundreds of them. Ars berates himself for being overly confident that they were still in the preparatory phase of their campaign, with fighting far off. Reaching the stables, Ars calls for Valkyrie, jumping onto her back as the ground begins to tremble, the rumble catching the attention of those nearby. Without delay, he spurs Valkyrie forward, knowing he has to act fast for everyone's sake, his determination surging as they head toward the approaching threat. The scene shifts to the Uruk side, where the scouts report that there are no signs of significant movement in the enemy camp. The Uruk forces assume the Fontana soldiers must be resting from their journey and are unaware of any impending attack, believing they hold a clear advantage. Confident in their strategy and speed, the Uruks anticipate an easy victory and plan to overwhelm the Fontana soldiers with a swift, brutal assault. Mounted on their magic beasts, they begin their advance toward the Fontana camp, radiating confidence and determination as they close in on their target, ready to strike at any moment.